All right, I believe we are live. So it is official. Pull up my chat. So it is official. Pull up my chat. That's funny. I got myself up on a window over here. That's funny. I got myself up on a window. Now. Hello, Siddhartha. Fix buggy stuff over here quick. Let people roll in for a second. Can anybody tell me how we sound and stuff? And then we'll introduce our guest. I need to post on the Discord still. Oh yeah, I'm gonna take you off for just a moment so I can post on Discord.
Okay.
Just on the video part of the overlay. Alright, gonna tag everybody on the Discord. If you're here and you're not part of the Discord, I'll a hot mess right now. Okay, it is finally fixed. I'll get Buggy back up here. Oh, that's not right. There we go. There's Buggy. All right. Thank you everybody for being here. We're going to be going over Loki, I guess like the almost a secondary protagonist of the Elbaf arc in One Piece, and I wanted to invite my One Piece content creator friend who I've met pretty recently. We both kind of have passed the 1,000 subscribers milestone for YouTube really recently, honestly. I mean, I think I did a video with PK Buggy here. That must have been a little over a month ago, and we were both under 1,000. And then, boom, he blew up with a couple more videos, and then my last video took off, and we both kind of passed that threshold. And if you haven't seen PK's content before, he makes a lot of really cool. You make a variety of stuff, right? You make a lot of video essays, some type of kind of One Piece culture commentary stuff. What would you say you do, PK?
I would say I just talk about all things One Piece. It is usually a video essay style, but there isn't really like a specific topic or range of topics that I focus on. It's whatever I find interesting at a particular moment. So if you like anything about One Piece, you'll probably enjoy at least one of my videos.
Yeah, I think you got a good variety of stuff. That's I'd say that's what I think. I really liked your Marineford video, and then I think it's why One Piece matters, or it's kind
Why One Piece is worth it.
why One
That's
Piece is
like
worth
my
it.
my big one.
That's your big one. All right. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Yeah, and then if you're from PK's channel and you're hopping on and hanging out for a little while, then I make I kind of do a variety as well, but I definitely lean towards like the analysis. I don't know. Would you call what I do like video essay? It's kind of a weird line.
Um, if not video essay, it would definitely appeal to people who enjoy them.
Yeah.
They're very comprehensive, and I think people will enjoy that aspect.
I don't know if you know this, PK, but I don't like. I currently haven't been scripting out my videos for quite a while, which kind of sounds
Yeah,
insane, but that's kind of how time has made things happen with how busy I am. It's made it so I can get stuff made, but I'm starting to. Honestly, you've kind of inspired me to do more time into the scripting process because I've just. I don't know. I don't know for sure that your stuff is scripted or how much it's scripted, but it felt like it was scripted, but in like a good way. You know what I mean?
yeah. It's mostly it's like some of them are 100% scripted and some are like 90%. But the way I approach is I just write. Basically, I just write an essay as I normally would, and just kind of keep in mind like some of the visual aspects and stuff while I'm writing, and then I just record it.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And have are you like always rereading arcs and stuff as well?
It depends on the video. When I do like my Straw Hat character videos, I always go back and read as much as possible.
Hmm.
But a lot of my stuff is just kind of stuff that I've been thinking about for so long that I kind of just pull it from memory, if that makes sense. I do go back and I've rewatched the series once, and I do read the manga pretty frequently. So I just have like a lot of it just bouncing around in my head. I try not to. I get burnt out pretty easily, and I try not to like read or watch One Piece too much, at least not while I'm doing content, because then I just get a little tired of it.
Yeah.
That's just me though.
Yeah, when my
I gotta like keep some
viewership
distance.
started going up, I actually like when I started doing YouTube, I was just rereading One Piece all the time, basically. And then when I started blowing up, I and went from like the 300 subscriber to like the 800 subscriber area. I just wasn't reading it at all for a little bit and just kind of went back on my ideas and was like, I'm gonna go just get some of this stuff done and just say what I've been wanting to say for a long time but haven't had the time to make the video, and I'm just gonna do it unscripted and just let it rip. And I don't know about YouTube, but if you watch other things, like oftentimes I get a lot of ideas from other anime, other shows, movies occasionally. I don't watch as many movies as I used to nowadays, but that's just the nature of having a kid, two kids.
Yeah, of course.
Um. Oh, by the way, hi Abe. I saw you in the chat. Thank you for catching the stream. It's nice seeing you in here again. Well, with that out of the way, uh, Loki. We've been hearing about him since the Whole Cake Island days. I believe is the first time it's mentioned. Um,
I believe so, yeah.
so in terms of, we can go over the Norse mythology background a little bit, and we'll kind of explain why that's probably not as um, comprehensive as people might think if they haven't dug into it themselves. And then we can kind of give what we heard about Loki before getting to Elbaf and kind of like as we first arrive in Elbaf, and kind of like the secondhand information, I would say, through the older generation of pirates. And then we'll kind of just start really digging into what Loki actually is, because what we hear about him doesn't really match what we see, I guess, when he's imprisoned.
Yes, as do many things in One Piece, it seems.
Did you learn anything by looking into the Norse mythology portion of his like kind of mythos?
A little bit, but I quickly realized that it didn't seem like Oda was really pulling from that very much. I think
Yeah.
Oda is pulling, as far as Norse mythology goes, I think Oda is pulling more from that in terms of Elbaf itself as a place
Hmm.
and like its culture. But as for Loki, I think it's more so just like with certain characters, it's just sort of like a nod to his original mythos. But
Hmm.
character-wise, I think he's really doing his own thing.
Yeah, that I think that's a pretty good summation. So when I looked into it and stuff, there's not very much comprehensive like primary text or research into it. It just doesn't exist. It's just kind of a fact of the matter. And then what does exist, like PK was saying here, it doesn't necessarily like match what Loki is in One Piece so far. So how much you can kind of drag into it is if you're watching other content creators and they're like going way into the Norse mythology, they're probably kind of doing it's probably more like fan fiction, which is fine, but that's just kind of like the fact of the matter. I think what is kind of like carried from the Norse mythology is that he is kind of a scoundrel or a trickster, and specifically there is a little bit of a problem with the word trickster there because the Norse mythology scholars that there are do agree that the word trickster is kind of like a pretty imperfect translation at this point. These are very old stories, and in modern English, it's been translated so many times over that the kind of original meaning is pretty much lost to us to a degree. But what I would say is that he is this kind of figure that is um, half Jotun, which is just another word for giant, basically for our context, and he's half god, which is the Asir tribe. And because of that, there's a couple of things that are important: is that he participates in Ragnarok, and that he kind of has this kind of like dual side to him, which kind of fits in with the trickster persona. And because of that, he's often able to help kind of find these kind of clever potential solutions for the Jotuns to kind of take advantage of the gods and all this kind of stuff. He's kind of like this X factor in everything, I would say. And in One Piece, I would say so far he definitely feels like an X factor.
For sure.
And besides that, we could talk about his introduction into One Piece a little bit. Um, he is known. So Big Mom and I guess King Harold tried to set up a marriage proposal with Lola the proposal. Lola the proposer, I think, is like her kind of like pirate nickname. And if I recall, you can kind of correct me here if I miss any details. Loki is like, according to the story, down for the marriage, but Lola actually is like, nah, and then essentially runs away from the Big Mom pirates and starts doing her own thing, and then eventually ends up in Thriller Bark for a while.
Yes, and Loki was actually the only person that she was not interested in marrying because in Thriller Bark she like Lola the proposer, she was proposing to everyone. Um, so it's a bit strange that she rejected Loki.
Yes. And what I was kind of thinking after I went through every time that Loki is talked about or um saying something himself in the Elbaf arc, and Loki, he's got this very interesting personality where he kind of puts on like he's kind of always mm, putting on a show. He's um, kind of gambling with kind of saying outrageous or incendiary stuff to kind of get a reaction out of people. But his true feelings are kind of masked. And, a lot of people right now are talking about how his eyes have been covered since he was a child, and maybe his um, true feelings are kind of covered up by these bandages as well. That's kind of part of the whole shtick here. But
Yeah, I like that.
yeah, but what I was thinking about with Lola in particular is like maybe Lola knew he was lying. Like, I don't think ultimately I don't think Lola wanted to uh, marry somebody that wasn't into it. Otherwise, she'd do the old Absalom move and just force it. Um, right? I mean, she's certainly probably stronger than some of the people she proposed to. So, assuming that she wants a person that actually wants her, I think it would make sense if she kind of saw through his lie and kind of did him a favor, and then kind of shows that early on, even as a kid or even as a young man, uh, Loki has always been playing this persona of maybe not really saying how he really feels for some reason, as we'll kind of get into here.
I think that would be really interesting because it would be almost a parallel in a way of Whole Cake Island of putting in Sanji,
Oh
sort of
yeah.
like an arranged marriage and
Mm-hmm.
you know that whole thing. I do think it is possible that like on the one side there's the possibility that Lola saw through this persona,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's also the possibility that the persona is what drove her away, I think, maybe. Um it I had I had the idea of it could have something to do with his ancient giant heritage because there's a lot of things that stick out with Loki for me are how he are his ancient giant heritage, especially after I think it was like 2 chapters ago when we saw. I mean, we all pretty much knew it, but we got confirmed that those were real horns.
Yep.
So
I guess that's
I just
like the.
think there's a lot of like sort of negative propaganda in Elbaf around ancient giants, as we've seen. It's not something that they're proud of, really, and it seems that Loki is like the only one with ancient giant heritage. So he obviously has like specific things that he did, which got him a bad reputation. But I also think right from the get go, when he was born, he was sort of already looked at differently because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe there are other things within his past that could connect to that. And I think maybe Lola could have rejected him because of that. I think there could be a mix of things. Maybe it could have been his reputation itself or that persona, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, and if this is true, it could be possible that the rejection is, maybe it really stung Loki, and maybe it's a part of why he is the way he is now. I think that's like that has to be crucial in how in his development, because otherwise I don't think Oda would have made it such a big point. Um, so I think he could have potentially scared her away, and that could have maybe hurt his ego a little bit.
Mm.
Um, Maybe it made him a little bit more spiteful. I think he does have a lot of spite due to this rejection of his ancient giant heritage, not just potentially from Lola, but just from Elbaf in general. So if there is some like real rejection from Lola, it could factor into the way he carries himself now.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff about um, blood with Elbaf, and it immediately kind of recalls like everything in Fishman Island because that's the other time in the story where we really get a lot of thematic One Piece related kind of like world building. around pure blood and, you know, kind of like inferior blood and stuff like this. And in general, I would say that one of the biggest surprises of Elbaf is basically how racist or xenophobic in general Elbaf is. It's
Oh
been
yeah.
something that's really caught me off guard. Specifically, Elbaf, like as a kingdom, would not accept Loki or Hajrudin as a ruler um, because of, I would say, because of their bloodline, right? Um, Hajrudin is half Elbaf giant and half some other giant, and as far as I remember, they wouldn't even let his mom become queen when King Harold and her were together. They just wouldn't allow it. You know, it was too big of like a scandal, which, you know, it's just crazy. And
Mhm.
then there's Loki, who, you know, he's born, and presumably he's probably born with like little stub horns or something. Like they immediately, you know, identify that as ancient, as a ancient giant. But it's also like Harold had horns, so like if he's so great, they should know that that doesn't really mean anything necessarily. You know what I mean? Um, and
Mhm.
then he gets blamed for like killing like a horse or something. Like he didn't kill the horse died, but they blamed it on him. Loki's blamed for his mother dying like a year after childbirth, and you're like, how do you what? How do you blame him for that? Um, and he gets blamed for like his playing doing pranks on people of Elbaf and stuff, and he gets called an arsonist at one point, and it's just it's a very weird dynamic.
Yeah. I think I think this idea has been thrown around before, but I do like the idea that because obviously this reputation is not, you know, founded in a lot of reality.
Hmm.
So it's possible, again, playing into the whole ancient giant thing, um, it's possible that the Gods Knights or somebody else, I think it's possible that basically that there's some sort of third player in all this that has deliberately throughout Loki's childhood made him look bad, like set him up in these situations, partially at least, because do think Loki definitely did do a lot of this stuff, and we just don't know the full context. But um, I think the Gods Knights have some history here at Elbaf, or at least some of
Oh,
them.
for
I don't
sure.
think they're just here just because this is the time when we get to know the Gods Knights. I think Elbaf specifically is connected to them, and also King Harold, but we'll get into that later.
I guess we can jump
So,
into a little bit of the God's Night stuff too, real
oh
quick
yeah.
here, while we're kind of mentioning it, because it is very interesting. Because, well, I would say that when we get the other God's Knights arriving to Elbaf through the like abyss portals or whatever they end up calling it, the void portals, um, they, I, I think it's Killingham. He mentions like, are you talking to Shamrock? He's like, are you here to visit like Harold's grave or something? And you're like, excuse me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's like probably the most obvious red flag. And then there's the fact that they have their little teleportation magic portals in the castle itself, which we haven't had confirmed, but it appears, you know, they have to be essentially placed there or something to do it. They can't just teleport anywhere from Mary Joie from for any reason, you know. I think that'd be a little OP anyways. And then there's all like the extra kind of destruction in the castle from when Harold was uh, allegedly murdered by Loki, and it just doesn't 100% fit the story that we're told by what we're actually seeing. And then there's this whole interesting concept of Elbaf in general, where it really is kind of like this mirror of kind of the Red Line and Mary Joie and the lower realm of One Piece in a lot of ways, where we got the three tiers. We got the underworld, which is where in current One Piece, uh, that world is tens of thousands of years old from the first world, said by Loki himself, and it's a place that receives no sunlight. And so the painter's glass that they use the rainbows on, they don't work there at all. And theoretically, there's probably some other stuff that wouldn't work there because we know uh, the Vegapunk satellite Lilith, when they got to the Sun Realm, she's like, "Oh my gosh, this like climate and stuff here at Elbaf is so like interesting scientifically, like how some of these things work. It's like the perfect place to work on science and stuff like that." But part of what I guess I'm getting to is like I feel like some of the Vegapunk technology or the technology that's basically inspired from the ancient kingdom itself might not work down in the underworld if they went down there. And then there's the Heaven Realm that we pretty much know nothing about, right? It's kind of
Yeah,
interesting because they
we have not
definitely
seen
mention
anything.
it, but we don't know anything about who's up there or pretty much anything. But in a lot of ways, that kind of sounds like Mary Joie or something as well, potentially.
Yeah,
Uh, Especially with like the level of disconnect there, and then obviously like Elbaf itself is kind of all connected to this tree, kind of like how One Piece is connected to the Red Line, and that it's very vertical, like um, the ocean level to like the top of Mary Joie. Just very interesting, and it's starting to kind of feel like the Elbaf is kind of like the predecessor of the Red Line and Mary Joie, but like the same like a version of that from the first world, and it's kind of like the remnants. It's also very interesting how isolated this country is. Like it's pretty rare for giants to actually go out and explore, which is kind of weird.
yeah, very similar to Wano.
Hmm.
And also the Sky Islands. I also think that maybe the Heaven Realm could potentially be connected to the Sky Islands, or at least maybe it was in the past.
Hmm.
But do you think like the Sky, the I don't know what you would call them, just the various Sky tribesmen and Elbaf and Wano are all like there's a reason why they're all so isolated,
Yes.
and definitely has to do with whatever happened, maybe before the Void Century, but definitely during it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um. Oh, another thing they said that was really interesting, and we're kind of transition a little bit into King Harold here a little bit too, because this works with the backstory of Loki that we mentioned. I just found this very interesting. So, King Harold is supposedly a very good king, trying to make Elbaf ready to be kind of open to the world with whatever that means exactly, and essentially makes them be able to kind of fit in more with the world, but at the same time has kind of weakened their theoretical military strength, right? Um, when the people in the village in Elbaf are in the Sun Realm are talking about Loki and telling the Straw Hats about them, just kind of generally, they refer to him as an arsonist and a prankster that threatened the people in the Sun Realm's lives whenever King Harold was away. And I'm like, away? Where was he going? What does that mean? And that kind of adds that kind of conspiracy that we're heavily implying here with the God's Knights and the Celestial Dragons. But I just found that very interesting because that line has not been really talked about too much so far, but that's just evidence that Harold was going somewhere somehow.
Yeah, he was involved with something. I think the world government. I think it's most likely that he was probably being teleported with the God's Knights.
Hmm.
Um, because it doesn't seem like Elbaf has like a lot of ships outside of the giant pirates.
Yeah, the
So I don't know
Eric
if
or
like
whatever it
they're
is. Yeah.
yeah. I don't think they're really prepared to sail away very often, obviously. So it just kind of further narrows it down to where's he going, or if we want to maybe play into the heaven realm, maybe there's something up there that connects to something. I don't know what. Maybe the Sky Islands, maybe there's some sort of technology up there, maybe
Hmm.
I don't know. I think it's more likely that he was going to Marie-Joie. I'm not sure why, but I think he had some sort of scheme or I don't know, conspiracy, I guess, if you will, with the world government to kind of keep, maybe not on his end, but as far as the world government, I think they're trying to keep the Giants docile or like passive.
Hmm.
And he obviously was a big supporter of like rejecting their violent past. So he probably had some good intentions, but I do think that overall what he was involved with was sort of trying to keep the Giants like the world government wants the Giants under their control because they don't want them going out into the world because they're scared, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So I think that they were using him or at least working with him to keep them passive. Like it's probably part of why he was spinning that narrative so much when he was ruling.
So I have a cool idea for you. Um, I
Okay.
actually want to drop my Discord join link in the chat if it works. I'll drop it in a second. But I was talking to somebody in our Discord last night, and he had a completely different read on Harold than I've honestly really seen so far. And this guy's just a fan of the channel, but what he said was very interesting to me. Um, it was what if Harold, because the story is that Harold ripped out his own horns or something, right?
Yeah.
That's how you read it as well. He was agreeing with this kind of conspiracy with the gods' knights and going to Mary Joie potentially and stuff like that. But it was more of a line of what if he was forced to rip out his horns, like as like some sort of
Oh,
punishment or something. And so there's this um, interpretation that I hadn't really been considering that Harold could be um, kind of a victim and kind of playing a role where he's kind of doing what Mary Joie, the Five Elders, Emu, who knows, wants to keep to save the lives of the actual people in Elbaf because he does genuinely care. And um, like there's this possible interpretation too that maybe he wasn't ashamed of the ancient giant blood. Maybe he was actually uh, proud of it, and if he was forced to rip out his horns, that'd just be like a horrible traumatic punishment, right? Um,
yeah. It does make me think because if he was really so against his heritage, why wouldn't he force that onto Loki, right?
yeah,
Because if he was that sort of guy, he would definitely push that towards his son. He would definitely view him negatively. But in that flashback we saw, he at least was presenting to, be very loving towards Loki and Harden.
yep.
So, yeah, it does make me think.
It's definitely a possibility I'm going to be keeping in mind going forward. But yeah, I had
Yeah.
never thought of that, and I just found it so fascinating. Um, that
It's
possibility.
so it's so interesting how all this information we've been told, it's like there's just so many different ways to view what is true and what is not about what we know.
Mm-hmm.
Like One Piece does this a lot with this sort of like unreliable history. And I think with Elbaf, there's just so many layers to it right now. It's so cool.
Oh, for sure. Sure. Um, yeah, and that I guess that we'll just kind of keep that in mind too as we go. That there's like this whole other side of Harold that's possible because I've been thrown for a pretty big loop where I'm like, you know, being open to other cultures and being less racist and xenophobic basically seems like a pretty good idea, especially from what I've been seeing so far.
Yeah.
And and I would even say from not today's chapter, but the previous chapter from last weekend, Loki's genuine pain when he's kind of telling or asking Hajrudin, like, do you really think I murdered our father because I wanted to? Um, kind of opened up more of the possibility that again, King Harold isn't what we think. Again, we're like it's like Oda's pulling a double reversal or something on us, and because I think the majority of the community is like kind of um, very much looking at King Harold side eyed, being like, uh, this guy might not be so good, right? But then
Yeah.
again, we got Shamrock potentially like, and other Gods Knights were like, hey, it would make sense if you wanted to visit his grave, which is another weird component to it. Um, yeah, just yeah, he's setting us up good. Tricky, tricky Oda. Let's see here. Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about Loki's appearance when we meet him because I find that very interesting. Oh yeah, and Zanzibar in the chat says that we're saying he kind of is similar to Odin in that way too, where he's being forced to act like a jerk or a clown, and you can kind of say that for Loki potentially as well, where Loki might not be as forced, but is maybe kind of playing a role um, on behalf of the Elbaf Kingdom, right? And potentially, in my opinion, potentially on behalf of his brother, because that relationship I think is going to end up being very fascinating as well. Um, okay, but Loki is massive, right? He's as big as Oars, is what it seems like. Is that what you're kind of hearing as well?
Yeah, I actually I remember I went back to the chapters of Thriller Bark to kind of do a size comparison. He's pretty much near identical to Oars in terms of how he scales to the Straw Hats.
Yep. And like we mentioned before, he's got the real ass ancient giant horns.
Yeah.
Um, which, just immediately marks him as something different, you know? And I guess it's not that surprising that with how kind of casually racist or xenophobic um, we've seen from Elbaf so far, like that kind of makes him a different race. And so just by that, they're going to see him as not really part of the in group or whatever on Elbaf just from that. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't, you probably read my notes a little bit here, but um, I was drawing that thumbnail from reference kind of a long time ago. And when I was drawing it, I was like, oh shit, like his hat is literally basically Luffy's straw hat, like shape wise. And I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I I did not even consider that until I saw your notes, but I really like that. I do think that was intentional too.
Oh yeah. It is I mean it's exactly the same shape. I mean it's got some kind of, Elbaf warrior um like metal plating and stuff on part of it and stuff, but the general like the brim of the hat and the part, the space for your head, it's exactly the same shape as a straw hat. And given that he's like, I'm the sun god. Um, just very interesting, you know. And I think it
Yeah,
just immediately makes me be like, well, Loki maybe wants to be Nika more than anybody else that we've kind of met on Elbaf so far. Whether he really
yeah,
has a fruit like that, a sun related fruit or not, he definitely is very inspired by I'd say probably the destruction component to Nika.
yeah. He has. I definitely think he has a very different interpretation of Nika. He has his own version of it. Probably the one that Gunko fears.
Yes, yes, yeah. Gunko is interesting. That is an interesting, definitely the most interesting of the Gods Knights in terms of
Yeah,
a role to play. I'm just reading some of the chat here. We got Shade. We get told that a lot of the giants have ancient giant blood running through them. Yeah, there is stuff like that, Shade. I guess I'm like, how do they even know? But I mean, like, the way I guess I see, how do you see the ancient giants, PK? Because I see them as like, you know, the predecessors or like the ancestors of Elbaf. And there's this kind of like interesting stuff in Elbaf about, mm, well, Scopper Gaban is like, you know, he obviously is basically married to an authentic Elbaf giant woman who, you know, maybe we all kind of wish we were married to a little bit. But he talks about like the love between the races and stuff like that. And I guess I'm like, the ancient giants kind of like pure bloodline through kind of like mixing with other races naturally has been you know, kind of um diluted on like an individual level, which, you know, that kind of phrasing carries a lot of like racial like overtones, but that's pretty much how they're talking about this generally anyways. They're a very race focused kingdom, and eventually all giants, like, I could see all the giants being connected to the ancient giants, um to some extent. Would you have any
yeah.
thoughts about that?
I think that the giants exist because of the ancient giants. I think it's sort of they came from, like you were saying, just over time, the evolution of you mixed races of the ancient giants and maybe humans or something else.
Yeah. Well, there's also the
Um,
possibility too that the ancient kingdom or people before the ancient kingdom who had this crazy level of technology, ancient energy, and an infinite power source. We definitely know they could do like genetic engineering type of stuff. So,
True.
like, they
Yeah,
could have,
we can't ignore that.
yeah, they could have like, you know, enslaved ancient giants. They could have and like used their blood to like create hybrids and all kinds of weird stuff. And then these other giants could be kind of like the offshoot of that, and, you know, we don't remember how they became into being, and it doesn't really matter. But the science the science part of the past is definitely something we can't ignore, or that we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think that also the Buccaneers, um, I think the Buccaneers are probably that sort of what was the word? Engineered race
Mm,
that were specifically, derived from probably ancient giants to be that perfect slave race.
yeah, yeah, the Buccaneers, they're endlessly fascinating too. Gonna have to talk about them more sometime as well. But keep going over Loki's appearance. He's got those his eyes covered with bandages,
Hmm.
and and sorry, I kind of want to take a break from talking for a second because I could hear my son having a tantrum, and kind of better. So I'll let you talk about the bandages on the eyes. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there's the symbolism there of him, because our eyes tell you a lot about a person's personality and who they
Hmm.
are in a given moment. So the fact that they're covered already just makes him more elusive and mysterious. And there's is that symbolism of him, hiding his true persona, uh, and that kind of relating to that. There is the possibility that he is just actually blind,
Hmm.
and then it makes me wonder: was he born blind? Did something happen? The fact that he's had them since he was a kid is really interesting. Um, it could have something to do with his future sight, which we can talk more about that when we get into like the hockey and stuff.
Hmm.
But I do think more than anything else, he definitely has some really strong future sight. There's some dialogue when he was being attacked by Gunko that makes me think that,
Hmm.
and it could be a thing, especially because after like very recently we've seen how far future sight can go with Shanks,
Hmm.
and that was coincidentally also happening on Elbaf. I think maybe he could potentially have like the strongest observation hockey that we've seen, and maybe him covering his eyes is sort of like a damper effect, kind of like Cyclops from the X-Men, if you know that sort of
Oh
thing,
yeah,
like
I know.
functionality.
Hmm.
Maybe it's something like that. And so maybe something that will happen later is he'll remove the bandages and it will sort of unlock some other sort of power, something that maybe he can't control. Um, but I'm very torn on whether or not he's like actually blind or not.
Yeah.
I think there's also, this is very unlikely, but there is the possibility that maybe he has like maybe he's part of the Third Eye tribe. That's probably really unlikely.
You
But when eyes are covered in one piece, I always
got to think about it a little
am
bit.
thinking like, because the Third Eye tribe is just such a big, outside of pudding, it's just such a big Chekhov's gun that I think it's gonna come back around. But yeah, I personally think the most likely is that it has something to do with his hockey. I don't think he's blind, but it could just be one of those things where we're kind of like reading into it too much, and maybe it's just a design choice. Who knows? What do you think though?
Well, I think him being the part that's really made me have to rethink a lot of things is showing him as a pretty young kid with the bandages on. I was like, dang. I almost feel like this is implied that he was born this way. And so then there's like, was he born blind? Well, he doesn't really need to cover his eyes if he's just born blind. Or does he have some type of special trait um, that maybe we go full Naruto and he got an eye implanted? I don't know. But I think probably the most important thing I would say about his eyes, like you were kind of implying, is that he is this trickster. He's often saying things that he doesn't really feel. So covering his eyes is very useful for him to kind of hide maybe his true feelings. And then as you were kind of talking about, like if he can't see through his bandages, then he's basically just using hockey to perceive everything. And uh, that kind of puts him more in the league of somebody like Fujitora, who blinded himself, and makes me think that, yeah, this guy's probably got that next level hockey, right? Um,
Yeah, and I do think, just to throw it out there, I think hockey is very important for LBF. I think if, as far as like the Straw Hats getting stronger, I think hockey is probably like the final frontier. That was made pretty clear at the end of Egghead that there's still pretty high ceiling for that, and the Giants, because hockey is so tied to strength of will and like bravado and all that. I think the
Hmm.
Giants just naturally have insane levels of hockey. So I think that's going to come up a lot as we get into the section of the arc where the action is really getting going.
Yeah.
There's also the possibility for as far as Usopp's role in Elbaf, Usopp is obviously he's going to have hopefully some more development with his hockey, so that could also give some credibility there.
Yeah, that's it. Bringing up Usopp is a useful point right now because there is kind of this. We've mentioned how he's very similar, how Loki is very similar to Luffy, which is not very surprising. But with his kind of constant lying and trickery and all that kind of stuff, and gambles, is also very similar to Usopp.
Yeah, I completely agree.
you,
I have some notes on Usopp.
you want Usopp to pick up that hammer? Straight call back to
I mean,
Alabasta.
all I'm gonna say is if it did happen, I would, I would die happy there. You know,
That would be so
I
sick.
don't need it to happen, but it would be awesome.
um, I guess I would mention too that Loki's hammer in mythology kind of got forgotten in the past. But in kind of the normal mythos, it is able to like change sizes and stuff as well. So, you know, possibly opening up that thing. But there's also this interesting thing where maybe that hammer was originally intended to be for Hajrudin, but he couldn't pick it up. And sounds like nobody could pick it up besides Loki. And we know in One Piece that weapons or blades and stuff like that kind of have their own will as well, right? And that's very
Yeah,
explicit with Zoro's fight with um, King and Wano, and it's pretty explicit even early on in Logtown when Zoro is at the blade shop and he like tosses the I think it's the Katetsu into the air and like holds out his arm, being like, okay, if the blade wills it, then it won't lop off my arm and it'll be mine. It'll choose me. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Also, the fact that weapons can eat devil fruits,
Yeah.
which I'm still a little disappointed we didn't learn why in Egghead, because I just feel like that's so interesting, but it can happen. So there's some sort of like will or like life force within all things in One Piece,
Hmm.
not just like living things.
Yes. Yeah, it is a very important part of it. All right, what else do we got about Loki here? Well, we already know he's always kind of smiling or smirking or kind of teasing with his tongue out, but something we don't hear too much about is that kind of feathered wings that kind of run across his chest and out onto like his biceps and triceps. We haven't got to see it too many times, but you can see it pretty clearly when he's sitting against a tree when he meets Luffy that he's just got this massive tattoo on him. Whoever that tattoo artist is, they had their work cut out for him because even if they were a normal size Elbaf giant, I mean, Loki's like what 3 times less the size of the regular giants.
Yeah, that was a year's worth of work for sure.
Had to do a lot of sessions. Yeah, and I mean, I guess like the really like with wings and birds, like it's just a pretty mm, on the nose motif for like freedom and liberation and stuff, which is ironic that when we first meet him, he is extremely not free, given that he's literally chained and drained of his powers from the Sea Prism Stone. Yeah. And his being chained and stuff, it obviously also brings up an immediate parallel to Zoro on Romance Dawn when he's imprisoned and stuff and meets Luffy, and it's a pretty clear parallel in my opinion. But do you have anything else you want to
Yeah.
say about all that?
Well, I had not considered the Zoro parallel, but as soon as I saw your note on it, just instantly reflecting on it is like everything. It's just
Hmm.
exactly the same. It's very interesting. I'm wondering what he's trying to say with that. Um, I guess more so it just kind of connects with how Zoro had that very like scary reputation.
Hmm.
Um, but he was actually just, a normal guy who had a reason to be the way that he was.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the most like direct and confident um, meaning that we can put into it. That things that we're hearing about Loki are basically as about true as what we heard about Zoro back then. I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty good way to think about it. And in general, like when you look at Loki and you look at Luffy, they both got a straw hat. They both are well. Luffy's not claiming to be a sun god, but he is, and Loki is claiming to be a sun god. And in general, when you just kind of look at him, like Loki's got a much darker aesthetic compared to Luffy, implying um, that they're kind of from the same two peas from the same pod, but um, maybe Loki at least appears to be kind of like a different version of a sun god, potentially. You know, we don't know. We really don't know how much he's lying about any of that. I mean, we know that he has a devil fruit power, and we know that he ate a devil fruit. So we know he can create lightning bolts. That doesn't really sound like a sun god power necessarily, but
I
yeah,
think that the lightning bolts, at least what I thought when that first happened, I think that's like
the hammer.
specifically because of the hammer. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's necessarily his powers.
yeah, I agree. I agree, but he's got something. He's got some devil
Yeah.
fruit, and it's like, okay,
I was
what's
wondering why he
going?
didn't use it when he
Mm-hmm.
broke out.
I'm
Or
guessing
no,
that the
because
sea
he still had the one chain on, right?
yeah, I'm guessing that those
Yeah,
sea
okay,
prism
never mind.
stones like are still affecting him
Yeah,
a decent
yeah,
more than he says. Let's put it that way. I
yeah,
think that's pretty reliable. But Loki's very talkative, persuasive. He's a very proud person as well. Um, oh yeah, Mr. Bushido in chat says if that's what I immediately thought when they brought up the lightning thing. It's like, oh well, that shit ain't gonna work on Luffy. It's kind of funny that they don't even really know what rubber is or anything, so they're like, even Hajrudin, who's like a huge Luffy fan, is like, "Stay away, Luffy. He'll hit you with lightning." And it's like that shit don't matter. Um, and I think overall, like Loki appears to reject everything that Harold kind of is claimed to have left in the hands of Elbaf to be peaceful, to be um, non-violent. Like
yeah,
I don't think Loki's scared to scrap, but I also don't think Loki is particularly. Um, I don't think he appears to be particularly racist or xenophobic like the other Elbaf giants, but he will use that kind of sensitivity to that to um, poke and prod at like his brother, which he brings up the whole like half blood stuff to Hajrudin, and he gets all like been out of shape about it, and then the end of the chapter he's like, stop worrying about yourself so much. You like your kind of own shame about this is making you blind to what's going on, which is ironic because Loki appears to be blind literally. So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting that the blind person appears to understand what's going on the most. The imprisoned person is the person that knows the most for sure. Like the only person that might know as much as Loki is probably Ja Rule because he was there.
yeah. And it makes me wonder why Ja Rule has maybe not said anything.
Mm-hmm.
How much how much can we really trust about Ja Rule's character and integrity, and what are the reasons why he's actively choosing to let Elbaf believe what they believe, unless
Yes.
he just didn't see the full picture, even though he was there. But it does seem a little strange that besides Loki, he's the only other person, so there has to be some significance.
Yes. Agreed. And I think, oh man, he's got this whole facade of being kind of like brutal and apathetic and just mean. But we see him talking to Shaggy, which, do you have any theories? Anybody have any theories about who Shaggy is? The only person I have seen is Shirahoshi because how Shaggy talks and what Shaggy says about something fucked up happening recently, and we know Shirahoshi was almost just pretty recently almost kidnapped on Fishman Island, almost had Fishman Island destroyed, and then was almost enslaved during the Reverie. Um, but yeah, do you have any ideas? Anything you want to say about the whole Shaggy stuff?
I love the idea that it could be Shirahoshi. It could make sense, considering that she was also kind of like locked up in a space.
Mm-hmm.
It would make sense that she would have like sort of pen pal. Um, but I think it's I think it's Kid.
Mm,
Um, just because the name Shaggy is like, because I feel like the name Shaggy, it has to mean something, and it reminds me of Luffy's nickname for Kid, and also Kid.
mm,
What I think Kid is, it has to come up in Elbaf somehow, and they are both Kid and Loki are very similar in personality. Um, honestly, maybe a little more similar than he is to Luffy. Um, like, cause Kid is also pretty similar to Luffy, but it's just like he's got that sort of aggressiveness to
yeah.
him that I think Loki also has. And I think Kid has to be somewhere on Elbaf or nearby. And I do think that regardless of whether or not Shaggy is Kid, if Kid and Loki were to meet, I do think they would kind of get along. Um, but I do fully acknowledge it could totally not be Kid. I don't have a lot of basis in that theory.
Mostly vibes.
I, it's mostly vibes, yeah. But
Vibes, a little
I'm very
dash of
curious.
hopium.
A little bit, yeah. But I would like the idea of Shirahoshi. I wouldn't be mad at that. Um,
I guess the
I
main thing
I
I would
do.
say about it not being Kid in my mind is that Loki
Mhm.
talks about how they've been friends for like a long time, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that
Like
too.
that's probably one of the bigger ones. And then just how he's kind of how he's constantly
I think
shown
the way
in.
he talks too.
Yeah. Well, he's chained to the tree too, right? And he's been chained there for I don't know 6 years or something. So we can assume they've been
Mhm,
friends for I don't know a few months, maybe like I'd say probably a year to like 6 years or whatever
yeah,
since he's been on the tree. And so then there's the kind of like possibility of like does the tree have anything to do with like how they're communicating? Like, is this person connected to like another atom tree? Are they possibly in that heaven realm above? Maybe
I think so. I think the Heaven Realm.
that's pretty likely. And is there anything below the seafloor in One Piece? Is kind of a possibility. I think we have to consider given what we learned in the Harley text. And if there is another world under there in a way, then uh, it could be somebody not even part of this world potentially if the tree like roots go all the way down there and that's like pretty like definitely wrapping tinfoil on my straw hat right now and putting it on, but like the kind of like the magical properties of Elbaf and the kind of wild lore that we get from the Harley is crazy. Yeah. Yeah, and Mr. Bushido in the chat, thank you for the super chat and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, Uh, Mr. Bushido is a hardcore theory crafter. He posts a lot in the Discord and stuff, and a lot of really cool ideas and observations that he makes. And yeah,
Yep.
he's been very interested in Kid returning to Elbaf in some way, and I personally think it is quite likely that Kid is at least in the underworld component in Elbaf. Like, I don't think that Shanks or even the Giants would just be like, "All right, cool, we'll just let him drown out there." Like, I think
Yeah.
they'd rather just throw him into the underworld and be like, "Bye bye," because Loki himself says that the underworld now is basically a gigantic prison and basically an execution yard. So that's where they would put people, anyways. And yeah, Mr. Bushido says he thinks he's with Shiki, which, if Shiki is gonna ever come into the One Piece story, it would make sense that he'd be like doing some weird shit in the underworld part of Elbaf. Um, that'd make enough sense to me.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I did want to go back to one thing about
Mhm.
Loki's personality. Specifically the way how he rejects the peaceful evolution of Elbaf. I think there's some interesting philosophical stuff there because in the real world with pacifism, or I guess more so like an orthodox pacifism, a very common criticism is that pacifism is only a philosophy that can be adopted in a world that was founded upon violence. So, in other words, it's a privilege. Um, now, whether or not you
Yes.
agree with that is whatever. But I think Oda is playing into that a lot with Elbaf about like pacifism is great and all, but violence, not necessarily violence, but you know defensiveness or like being ready to enact force in order to protect or defend is it has its place for sure, especially in times of conflict. And I think that that's probably what Loki's mindset is.
Hmm.
um I think he just sort of realizes how much danger there is coming in the world, like from the world government and just this ongoing war. I think he's the only one who's like really aware of all that.
Hmm.
And he recognizes that, you know, pacifism, the further they go into it, it's only going to hurt them more in the future. And
Hmm.
what else did I put here? I wonder like where exactly he got this from. Like, did something happen to him, or just a bunch of things happen that like sort of shaped that worldview? Or I also wonder if maybe he got it from somebody specifically. Did he like inherit someone's will? Does he have like a Shanks figure? Because
Hmm.
we know that Luffy got his whole worldview about pirates and how pirates should act from somebody else, from Shanks. So does Loki have somebody like that? Um, I thought maybe potentially Shaggy because it's the only other person we know, but given they've never met personally, so that's not likely. Um, so I don't know who it could be, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's somebody like that just because of how Oda writes this sort of thing where people develop ideas and concepts from others, like they get them from some sort of role model. Um, we obviously know it's definitely not Harold,
Yeah.
so I just wonder where does that come from? Like where, as far as his personality and his perspectives go,
Hmm.
like why is he the way that he is? Like what happened? Who did he get it from?
I'd say this could be potentially related to his whole like blindness or his eyes being covered, at least, because maybe he's not blind and there's something else going on there and he's got some type of special eyes, but could be related to that. But
Could
it could
be.
also be like, and part of that could also play into this next idea a little bit as well, but maybe his inspiration just is Nika. Like, maybe he is just
Mm,
very um kind of inspired or something by the Harley and stuff like that, or maybe he learned something else. Like, maybe there's something else that's locked away or something, somewhere in Elbaf that is not known. Uh, that's certainly possible. Um, yeah, it's
Could be
very
similar to
interesting.
Yamato with Odin.
Yeah, it could be something very similar to that, I think that's fully possible. I think though his main inspiration I would say definitely is from, at least from what we know, because there could be another figure in here for sure. It's just he's really wants to be Nika and truly believes in that, and like you kind of are saying, because he believes in Nika, he probably believes in this like quote unquote prophecy as well, and so and maybe it's taken it more literally and seriously and urgently than the rest of Elbaf, because I'm sure you're kind of in agreement that like the rest of Elbaf in general doesn't really seem to understand the immediacy of this prophecy in terms of what is about to happen in the world of One Piece. Like we know that shit is about to become relevant in, I don't know, a week or two or maybe a month, depending on um, what exactly happens in the very near future. They don't have that same urgency. Otherwise, they'd be like, I don't know, sharpening their weapons or something, or making sure everybody's kind of ready to go and not getting blasted drunk.
Yeah, I don't even know if they've gotten Vegapunk's broadcast. Like, obviously the
Oh
Dory and
yeah.
Broggy and all them, they know, but I
Hmm.
don't think the entire country knows. And if they do, I don't think they really
Care.
care because I don't
Yeah.
think they have that warrior spirit within them to be inspired by like that
Hmm.
sort of declaration of like we got to go and find the One Piece and fight against this threat. They're just like not even provoked by that if they've heard it.
And Mr. Bushudo, thank you for the $2 super thanks again. And he says something pretty interesting that I'm going to definitely look back into for the edited version of this video. Of he says if you like kind of look carefully, Luffy is wearing Kid's cloak cape thing. Um, I don't know if it's a cape or if it's a coat that in One Piece they never put their arms through the sleeves for the most part,
Yeah,
which probably would look stupid as hell in real life, but in manga it looks
they
so
pull it
sick.
off. They pull it off.
uh, yeah, I'm gonna definitely look into that. Thanks for letting me know. I, I don't think I've paid too much attention to the specific stuff that Luffy is wearing in this arc because I just assume he tossed something on. But
Well, he got that from Road, right? Because Road like dressed them up, didn't he?
yeah, the like living dolls.
So
Yeah.
maybe Road got those clothes from
Oh,
Kid. Maybe he picked them out of the water
Road
because
would
he
do
hasn't
that.
heard.
Road would scoop up. He'd be like, "Oh my gosh, look at this super rare
Yeah,
Jaggy!" Like these were 3 billion berries or whatever. That's funny. Uh, yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, I think the conversation with Shaggy is so interesting too because in that conversation, Loki is just straight up like a sweetheart. Like he is just literally just kind. Like literally kinder than I've seen Luffy talk to somebody probably. Um, he's
hmm
empathetic and implies that Shaggy and Loki have shared their trauma with each other, and that's kind of like a big basis of their understanding. Um, and it's also just interesting that it seems like they might be kind of keeping their identities secret to each other for some reason too. I don't know. And there's a whole thing too with all the animals in the underworld seem to love Loki, you know?
Yeah,
So,
very much like Luffy's relationship with I forgot the name of the island, but where he trained with Rayleigh.
yeah, yep. Yeah, I can't remember the name of that as well.
He has that ability to just sort of connect with beings regardless of whether or not they're human. Like I don't think Luffy really views animals and humans very differently, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
He's just like,
Yeah,
"Oh, it's another living thing. You're my friend or you're not my friend." And that's it.
yeah. The friend of the show, Bean, who I was talking to, who I don't think he's in the chat, but we were talking last night on my Discord that Luffy's kind of relationship with meat is very interesting because, like, meat is obviously something that comes from life or an animal, and yet he's sorry about the Discord notifications here. It's probably Mr. Bushido posting his stuff. Uh, but Luffy and um oh my brain it's dying. Uh where were we?
We were talking about the connection with the animals.
Oh yeah, he sees meat as just meat, but it was or is an animal, and he's totally happy to eat it until he becomes friends with it, and then he's like, no, no, no. This meat
Yeah.
is now not meat, it's a friend. It's just a very interesting just a very interesting dynamic, and I'm curious if it ever comes back into the story, this kind of like how he differentiates these type of things. Yeah. I also found it interesting that Shaggy said that they are just really bored, or Loki says, "Yeah, we're both bored. Like it's nice having somebody to talk to," which implies that Shaggy is also kind of just stuck somewhere, stuck on their island, stuck in a uh, room or something like that. Um, just interesting stuff, right? Could again play into that Heaven Realm thing, Shirahoshi, or well, I don't know how Kid would play into that, but maybe he's just bored right now after getting his ass whooped.
Yeah, I don't think Kid will have a major role, but he is kind of a loose end. So I think he's going to come up somehow. I just don't. I doubt he'll do anything super significant. Like,
Soon, at least, yeah. Like I
yeah,
could see him showing up for the final war or
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, pretty. Um. Okay, so we've learned quite a bit about one. Well, I guess as we kind of got into his personality. We got this relationship stuff that I'd like to talk about. So I talked about how after Harold was murdered, Elbaf refused to give the kingdom to Loki or Hasrudin, and that King Harold died 14 years ago in a battle with Loki and a bunch of other giants in there that completely wrecked the castle. Loki is said to have killed 100 of those warriors, and the only surviving people, maybe in some sort of conspiracy to a degree, is Loki and Chief Ja Rule himself. Chief Ja Rule, I think, is one of the main things that's kind of weird about this is obviously the whole like him just surviving this is kind of weird, right? Like, does that mean he was fighting with Loki? Possibly. But then there's also the whole component with Big Mom's backstory where um, Madame Carmel or whatever is running like an orphanage to ultimately make like soldiers for the world government, for the Navy, for God's Knights and stuff like that. And the question kind of becomes like, how much did Harold, Chief Ja Rule, and whatever the other guy's name is who is killed by Big Mom, um, how much did they know about what was truly going on there? Because if Chief Ja Rule did know about the role of the world government in kind of semi in the past 100 years with Elbaf, then like he could be a really kind of nasty X factor in all of this. That's pretty tough to pin down so far. Do you have any thoughts about Ja Rule?
Um, I don't have a lot, but I am curious in the for the same reasons you are. I th- don't I don't think he was in on what was going on with the kids. I just don't get that vibe from him.
Yeah,
He seems relatively harmless,
He seems like one of the only people that actually doesn't see Loki as a piece of garbage or something, right?
Yeah, and I think that definitely has something to do with whatever happened in the
Mm-hmm.
castle. Um, but then there's also the thing of like, why is he not doing more to correct that reputation?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of I don't know if you've seen Naruto,
Oh yeah.
but like the third Hokage and Naruto, like he didn't really do a lot to help Naruto out as a kid. And so it kind of gives similar vibes there.
Yep.
But yeah, it's more so I just want to know like what's the context there. But I don't think he's like a bad dude or anything.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And then there's the whole thing about like how he's into older women, but is the oldest man in the world, and you're like, okay, what's going on there? I'm gonna take a quick
Oh yeah.
bathroom break for a moment. If you don't need to do the same or anything, I'll be super quick. You can go ahead and talk about maybe, um, I'd talk about like Loki's power and hockey a little bit. I know that you had
Okay.
some stuff you wanted to say about observation at least, but I'll be right
Mm-hmm.
back.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so as far as Loki's power, where does everyone think that he scales? Because I personally think that at least in terms of hockey, I think he surpasses Luffy a little bit because I think he's meant to sort of push Luffy past another threshold. Um, I think he probably is scaled pretty close to where Luffy is power-wise though overall. Um, near Yonko tier. Yeah, he's gotta be. He's gotta be. Especially if he's like similar to Luffy. He's definitely like top 15, maybe top 20, I don't know. But as far as hockey goes, he's definitely up there. I do think he's above Luffy. Um, mostly because I think hockey is going to be like the final upgrade, if you will, that Luffy needs. Like his Devil Fruit is he's kind of at his peak. He does need to learn more about the limitations, but after what we saw with Joy Boy's hockey and Shanks and everything, I think that it's clear that Luffy still could learn a little bit more. You don't think he could be Kaido? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I could say I don't know if I could say confidently whether I think he would beat Kaido or not, because I think we need to see a little more. But I think from at least from a narrative perspective, I doubt he's he's not really framed to be on that level, like as far as the tone is. The other thing about his power that I think is super interesting is, his yeah, Luffy probably could not beat Kaido where he's at now. Um, but I think after he leaves Elbaf, he'll probably be at that point. I think he's pretty close though, personally. But the other thing about Loki is I wonder what his devil fruit is, because that's going to be a huge thing. That's like a major loose end. It's something that we were specifically told he ate devil fruit. We just don't know what it is.
Yeah, especially if it's
We
like
know that,
awakened or something. Whew.
yeah, whatever it is, it most definitely is awakened. Um, I think everyone kind of assumes it's going to be a zone, myself included. But it could be interesting to see if he has like a Paramecia or a Logia. If it's a zone though, it's probably going to be a mythical creature. I think it could either be a Fenrir model, um, or there's this creature called Garm. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Garm, which is like this large. It's similar to it's like another dog sort of model, but it's a large hound dog that specifically guards the underworld, which I think is called like Hell or something like that, like Hell with one L. And it's that's obviously where Loki is now, so maybe there's some connection there. I
You
do think
know, you want to know something cool about that? Um,
what's
in Ragnarok, do you know who Garm fights in Ragnarok?
I'm not too familiar with that, no.
Ah, okay. He fights somebody named Tyr, who is from the Asir tribe, which is like the gods of um, Norse mythology. And Tyr is a one-armed um, god of like justice and mediation who had their arm bitten off by Fenrir back um, earlier in the life by kind
Hmm.
of doing a kind of mediating with I forget the exact context around it, but it was to basically like protect other people. Um, and so I guess what I'm implying is that Tyr sounds a lot like Shanks in terms of role and the one armedness and being a god of this kind of world. And in Ragnarok, Garm and Tyr they slay each other during Ragnarok. Just kind of like an interesting addition to what you were saying.
Hmm. Interesting. That could maybe correlate to Shamrock then, because we know Shamrock's going to be an opponent,
Mm-hmm. And
and we know obviously,
Garm is pretty similar to Cerebus. Just to throw that
yeah,
out there too.
especially like visually.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that. I think that it's also because you initially brought up this idea of like these alternate sun gods.
Yeah.
I think it's very possible that, especially because we know that devil fruits kind of come from desire and people's like sort of collective hive mind, and if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So just all these ideas that already exist can be manifested. Obviously, the giants are thinking a lot about the sun god. Um, they probably have, if we're going in, if we're playing into this idea, they probably have some sort of sun god model, and Loki. That could be why Loki, um, you know, identifies with the sun god. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
he ate the fruit and he's like, okay, so this is my destiny now. Um, I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. Like, would he maybe have the same sort of like reality manipulation? Would he have like the rubber? It's kind of hard to picture how that would manifest, but I do think it's very possible from a narrative standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I've been I've been thinking the same thing. I don't know how hardcore I am on like the multiple devil fruits existing or not. It's so up in there, but I definitely think it's possible. And um or like multiple of at least the very similar devil fruits, like somebody like Nika who has multiple versions. Like why couldn't there be multiple versions of the same thing? It makes a lot of sense to me. A lot of I got a lot of comments on pushback on that video. It's kind of funny. And then a lot of people also were like, "This is really cool and interesting," and I get it, you know.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit of a divisive topic because of people have very strong opinions about the lore of Devil Fruit that we've been hearing since I don't know, like the Water Seven and his lobby
Yeah.
era. But I mean, all of that type of stuff. I guess I would say about Devil Fruits, like that is all very like I mean how trusted necessarily of sources of information. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. If anybody saw in the chat, that's my wife, and she says she needs help getting back in the house. I want to go help them real quick, but
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
Does every awakening manipulate reality? Um, I think it was kind of implied when Doflamingo sort of explained it. And I don't remember. Did we see Katakuri awaken? I think we did. But if not, then then the other instances where we've seen that is Kid, Luffy, and Doflamingo. And Doflamingo obviously, he summoned the strings from the ground. Luffy made the ground bouncy. He was able to sort of manipulate it to be different shapes. He was able to, do that same thing with Kaido. And then Kid was able to apply his magnetism to other things, like Big Mom. So I think it is kind of implied that uh, awakenings do kind of inherently bring that ability to inflict your powers on the real world and not just within yourself. That's at least what I would assume.
Is that the awakening manipulating reality comment that you responded to?
Yeah, Zanzi was wondering, and I think it is kind of implied.
Trying to think any examples. It's a little bit tough with the Zoan one sometimes, right? Because like, was it Lucci manipulating
Yeah,
reality?
Lucci didn't do anything.
Kaku, I think, is also awakened. Tough to say. I mean, definitely like the mythological ones and stuff. Hmm, tough. I mean, they
At least the
definitely.
Paramecia, I think we can confidently
Oh
say.
yeah, Paramecia for
Luffy's
sure.
could just be Luffy's like ability to do that could just be the inherent abilities of Nika, not
Yeah,
necessarily his awakening.
yeah.
So yeah.
Before Mr. Bashuda, by the way, thank you for the $2. He said, I think Kid is another sun god. I have a theory. I've never. That's one of. I mean, I'm happy to put on a tinfoil hat and like let that theory run a bit and stuff, but I've never heard that before in my life, so I'd love to hear some reasoning for that.
So
I,
that actually just made me think of something.
oh yeah.
Um, because it made me think: do these false sun gods all need to be from the D tribe? And if so, do we think that maybe Loki is a D? Is that even a possibility? I haven't personally considered that
Mhm.
until now, but I
So
wonder if he does have some connection.
personally, with the D, I don't think, for the most part, like I think people can become D members without actually being one in the first place. I guess, like, or without specifically having the name. Um, Kind of like Sabo potentially could become a D member, could be considered one. Um, a D member. I mean, just like this to me, a D member, like what for sure marks them as a D member to me is like dying, like facing death or facing the possibility of death and like smiling in the face of that pain, tragedy stuff. Like, and how I've always read it, and I find the most interesting on a thematic level is that when a D is going to die, they smile because they embody the idea of not falling into despair. Like, just because I'm
Yeah.
about to die, like don't let that don't let that poison you or something, right?
Yeah,
Um,
no regrets about what happened, no worry about what's gonna happen.
and to
Like
me,
it just is.
a lot of that does tie into Fishman Island, and we could talk about Fishman Island and Elbaf a little bit because they're very interesting. Where the whole point of Fishman Island, right, is that somebody like Hody Jones and the Fishmen, and the tragedy of Fisher Tiger is that um, Fisher Tiger wasn't able to let go of his hatred for humans because of what has happened to him, and the tragedy of that is that people that are born in Fishman Island and people who are just born in the world, they are inheriting hatred and stuff from the previous generations. And um, something like a smile at the face of death, um, like say somebody's killing another person, right? Somebody that's very important to a character or to you or however you want to think about it. If they just die and they're just like looking sad and distraught the whole time, then like you're gonna hate the person that killed them. But if they die and they have like a smile on their face somehow, you're gonna be like, "What the hell? like you're not even going to think about necessarily the person that killed them. You're going to think about how in the face of death they were still smiling and laughing or whatever, and in that way, like the D is able to kind of completely penetrate hatred. That's how I've always read it. And then it's and the interesting part about Loki and Elbaf is like he's born and everybody already hates him, basically. Like people have hated him, like they inherited their hatred from um, learned kind of propaganda, I would say. And in that way, it feels very
Yeah.
similar to Fishman Island. Do you have any idea of what you think about the D or who could be D's, or do you think it's kind of set in stone, or do you
I
think
think
Loki's a D?
that I don't know if Loki's a D, but what I think about sorry, someone mowing their lawn.
Classic. It's not that bad. It's fine.
What I think about the D is I don't think it's sort of I think it's can embody. I don't think I think that was kind of to me that was kind of implied in the chapter with Sabo and Cobra when he flashed back and he was like it having a D Ace and Luffy were like having a D isn't a big deal. We can just call you Sad Debo. We can just put a D in your name. It doesn't really inherently mean anything, right?
Yeah.
But those who have the D tend to have a certain disposition that was, genetically inherited probably because of um, whoever decided to whatever like group decided to, name their kids or whatever with a D, that obviously gets genetically passed, but there are those that can be born and embody the qualities of those who have a D. And even though they don't have the D in their name, they're still sort of living along those same lines. Might be the case with Odin, unless he just secretly had the, but he's obviously what we consider to be a D without actually having it in their name. And so I think it is sort of like it's more so just like a symbol that people wear, or at least that's how it started.
Yeah.
So I think there's like some blurred lines of what it could actually be.
Yeah. I think blurred lines is a good way to think about it. That it could be that there's definitely a big possibility that people can become D's or are D's in a few different ways, like you said, where your parents or whatever can just give you the D name as part of like your family line. And then there's also the possibility with the Sabo and Cobra instance where um, you can kind of become the first D member or whatever in your family line. And from then on, it's inherited somehow. And I guess, what
Yes.
kind of reminds me of all this a little bit, this is the first time I've ever thought of this, but you'll probably remember it as well because it's interesting. The boa seraphim, the S snake, is also in love with Luffy, and Vegapunk's like,
Yeah.
dang, like that's crazy that that's in the bloodline elements. Like, wow, like the bloodline elements hold so many secrets, and so in that way, like maybe once somebody becomes the first D member, like something kind of like in their soul or something, which maybe is somehow related to bloodline elements, is changed. And then from that point on, like any of their kids or anything like that, any of their like future ancestors are they inherit that genetic information. They inherit those bloodline information. They inherit that will, um, and then are D's in a way. So it's kind of like maybe there's like you can become a D, and then like everybody after that can just inherits it. That's kind of like the most solid answer I can think of at this moment.
Yeah, I do think Oda's going for like a literal iteration of inherited will that like your intangible aspects of yourself, like your soul and your will, do kind of like become a part of your genetics after the fact. It's not just what you're born with. It's probably what he's doing there.
Yeah, I'm like kind of laughing at this whole like the person whoever's mowing their lawn next to like your window or whatever.
Yeah, it's literally right
Discord
next to it.
Discord hates it. It hates it. It's like it's cutting you off pretty well, but I mean I got your whole ideas and I tried to sum it up for you as best I could, but I'm
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
just open your
You
window.
translated it.
Shut the fuck up.
So
Why are you mowing your lawn at 3 p.m. on a Sunday? You know, it makes perfect sense.
yeah,
It's just that's kind of the way it was. Like last summer, I actually recorded. I didn't have an office with all my shit last summer. Because I have two kids and we have a 3-bedroom house. And so, you know, my wife and I have our room, and then each of my kids had a room for a while. But because we wanted our own space so badly, I was like, they're going in the same room. Like, it's gonna be chaos, but we're gonna make it work because I want an office. But last summer I was like recording fairly frequently, like outside in my backyard, and you know, I live in kind of like the standard suburban American neighborhood where, like, on the weekends or just anytime, somebody could be mowing a lawn. There's like planes flying above, and I just have to like stop. I just have to sit there and wait so many times, or like just
yeah.
like hope
I
I
know the
can
feeling.
denoise it enough to kick it out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's a pain in the butt.
It's got to at least be better than recording in like the city.
Oh yeah, like yeah, loud. It's yeah, guys, YouTube is so hard, so hard. Toughest job in the world. Not that it's really our job. So yeah, I mean, but you know, we're at the point where we're taking it more seriously. Like it could potentially become at least a part-time type of job at some point.
Yeah, just a job without the financial benefits currently.
Yeah, it's there's kind of like that weird line with this as a hobby and stuff. And yeah, I don't know about you, but I assume you like making videos a lot. I personally, regardless of how
Oh
my
yeah,
channel ever goes, I'm making videos about whatever. I'm making stuff. It's just a fun hobby, and I'm just gonna make videos forever now, to some degree at least.
yeah. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't enjoy it first and foremost. I would have stopped long ago.
Yeah. Well, Zanzibar, no way planes are really loud. Yeah, where I live, I'm kind of sandwiched between two, like a small airport and then like an airfield that's kind of like over the hills, and so they always are like flying, like, if especially in like the summer when the weather's nicer and stuff, like there's just like small planes constantly flying over, and small planes are super loud, and they like use like leaded fuel and stuff, which is not good for air quality, but they also just have like very loud engines. So I'm just like, oh my. And I liked recording outside. It was pretty fun. I'd like to try it again, but I'm definitely, now that I've been kind of spoiled by this office, I'm a little nervous about making it work. Uh, okay, let's get back into the One Piece stuff a little bit here.
Yeah.
So, what about? Is there anything you want to say? I guess I could start a little bit while that guy mows his lawn or whatever. Hajruden's relationship with Loki, I basically see it as a few ways, right? Loki is the younger brother. Um, he's more similar to Harold in terms of like having the horns and kind of like the more like ancient giant traits, even though obviously Hajruden would also have ancient giant blood in him if he's a son of Harold. He doesn't have the horns, and Loki is just massive, absolutely dwarfs Hajruden, and so there's like maybe a little bit of an inferiority complex going on here for Hajruden, and Loki kind of pushing his buttons. And while it seems like Hajrudin is kind of in line with a lot of people of Elbaf and blaming Loki for a lot of Elbaf's woes. Um,
Hmm.
Maybe from what we learned from the most recent chapter is that like Loki maybe respects or even like kind of looks up to Hajrudin more than Hajrudin even knows or anybody even knows. And that maybe
Yeah.
even Loki's just kind of like disappointed in Hajrudin kind of always being a little lost in the sauce with his own kind of um, complex around Loki and um, his own kind of, what does he call it, like petty drama or personal drama. That Hajrudin is ironically the person that is most blind in this instance, that he's not seeing the kind of reality around him, and that he's um, hallucinating these illusions of what is actually happening, just kind of like falling right into the, yeah, like again, just getting lost in the sauce of um, what are essentially just rumors. And then I would say that he's obviously jealous about Loki being able to wield Ragnir, that warhammer. Um, Very likely a ancient treasure of Elbaf. Um, Obviously mad that Loki is potentially like directly or indirectly responsible for King Harold's death. Um, and in general, I think that Hajrudin is just deeply ashamed of his half blood, even though he wants to ultimately overcome it. He's not. He wants to overcome it and become like the king of the giants, but he really kind of has to accept himself, I would say. And part of accepting himself is probably being able to accept Loki to a degree. Um, and then it makes me wonder, like, how much does Hajrudin play into what Loki has been doing here, where Loki is accepting the blame that's been placed onto him for some reason? Is he accepting the blame to kind of make Hajrudin look more acceptable in comparison? Or like Loki is a curse, so like Hajrudin is like a blessing to the people of Elbaf type of idea. Yeah, just a very interesting dynamic going on there. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
So well, first off, as much as I like Loki, I definitely felt for Hajrudin
Hmm.
when he was reflecting on his childhood. I feel like that added a lot of depth. Okay, but yeah, it added a lot of depth to his character, and um, it did make Loki look a little bad, I guess. But I don't think that Loki really hates Hajrudin. I think my interpretation, maybe there's a reason why, like, I mean, you brought this up too, but maybe there's a reason why he was so brutal towards him.
Hmm.
I do like the idea that it is, what is it? That it's like he's becoming that martyr. Like he's trying to protect Hajrudin, like take some weight off him. But I also think maybe it's sort of like a tough love sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
he's trying to like secretly trying to protect or inspire him or like
Hmm.
push him, you know? And I don't know if it's necessarily the right way to go about it, how he's doing it, but his intentions there are pure. They're coming from a place of love. But yeah, that's pretty much my current interpretation of their.
That makes sense. It's funny. I'm like, is that guy mowing the same spot next to your window over and over? It's so
Yeah, I'm
funny.
just wondering like how many times he needs to go back to that. I think it's
Gotta really get it. I've
yeah,
also been wondering who, like, we learned a little bit about Hasruden's mother, but all we know about Loki's mother is that she's dead, like classic One Piece
yeah,
mother. But we don't really know about like who she was before that. Um, and then also like Loki's blamed for it, but there's like, especially with kind of like the conspiracy stuff with the celestial dragons and the gods knights, and earlier I kind of put forward the idea that Harold is more of a victim here than we first kind of have been kind of thinking, and that maybe he was punished at some point and was forced to remove his own horns, or somebody else removed them. We don't know if anybody ever actually saw that. And that kind of puts forward the possibility as well that Loki's mother could have been killed by God's Knights or Celestial Dragons or whatever as another punishment to Harold, um, particularly nasty one. And then the propaganda machine blames Loki on that, and because of his reputation when he's born as a cursed prince, the Elbaf people kind of eat that slop up because Elbaf is an isolated nation. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going around sailing around the world as their old kind of reputation had when they kind of um, sieged the entire New World way back in the day, and then more in recent times, like uh, over 100 years ago, like the Dorian Broggy's crew, the Elbaf warrior giants or whatever they were called, um, were going around, but that's a relatively small crew. Um, they're just very isolated, and because of that, like very susceptible to lies, very susceptible to propaganda. The more they're isolated, and they're not even isolated just by them not going anywhere. It's like people are not able to get to Elbaf, and even the people of Elbaf say that the few people that do make it to Elbaf, they roll up on the underworld and they're like, "Damn, Elbaf sucks and is scary and cold and shitty," and they never actually make it up to the Sun Realm where people actually live, right? And so, in some way, the people that do exist in the underworld are actually more uh, aware of the outside world and aware of other people more than the people in the Sun Realm. Since the people in the Sun Realm basically don't even go into the underworld, it seems, for the most part. Just very interesting
yeah,
kind of situation going on there. Um, another really interesting thing I found with a relationship was with Shanks, with Loki, because the first we hear about Shanks is that obviously Shanks is the one that captured uh, Loki when he went on his rampage. But then when Luffy talks to Loki and he brings up Shanks, then Loki's like refers to Shanks as a coward, and then Luffy gets pissed and like almost like bashes his head into the tree, and Loki says, "I was only joking. Like it was just a joke. Come on, man." Which if you take at face value, means that he does actually think Shanks is maybe a great pirate or something, right? And what kind of added to this is when Loki talks to Shamrock, and he's like, "Hey, why do you look like Shanks? Why do you look like this?" He refers to like, "Why do you have like the face of a great pirate?" And so, to me, that kind of like raises the possibility that Loki might um, see Shanks as not a coward necessarily, but was just trying to push um, Luffy's buttons to try to ultimately push him to freeing Loki. Kind of backfired on him momentarily there, but It's an interesting possibility that maybe, like, we know that Shanks visited Loki before he left Elbaf. Um, Maybe it wasn't quite a hostile visit that we originally thought, and that, maybe Shanks knows a lot more about what's really going on Elbaf, which is also interesting because Shanks left, so whatever he thought
Yeah.
was going to happen, like, he's either leaving it in Loki's hands or he's leaving it in Luffy's hands if he really somehow knew Luffy was for sure going to come to Elbaf. Tough to say. Zanzi says in that case maybe it's lucky. Maybe Loki like imprisoned himself. There's definitely,
I don't think so. He
yeah,
might have like maybe not been as resistant,
yes,
but I don't know.
I would say. But there's also like, why did Loki leave Elbaf and kind of go on some type of rampage or something around the world, right?
Yeah.
I would suspect that it's because of whatever happened with King Harold and that whole kind of conspiracy in the castle. That while Loki didn't want to drag the rest of Elbaf into like a major global conflict with the rest of the world and causing so much death and destruction that is kind of legendary in the past, and maybe Loki was like, I'm just gonna do it myself. Seems like Loki was going around for a while. I heard you talking about how strong Loki might be, and I
Yeah.
think that his kind of rampage and Shanks's position, probably post capturing Loki, essentially implies that Loki was probably around the strength of an emperor. That kind of where you guys were landing with him.
I think he's got to be just because from a narrative standpoint, it wouldn't make sense for him to be
Mm-hmm.
much lower than that because of where Luffy and all them are.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the guy stopped mowing his lawn.
Yeah, I think he's finally done.
That means I don't have to
I
be
think
quite
so.
as long winded. That's funny. Did you see any differences between how like the old generation of Elbaf and the younger generation view him? Because I remember when I was looking at the memories, or not the memories, the
Mhm.
nightmares of the kids. I mean, some of them were like, Loki is like the most. It's the scariest thing to me.
Was he one of the nightmares?
Yeah, one of the kids was like, "Yeah, Loki is like." Somebody was like, "Nika," and then somebody's like, "What? No, Loki's scarier than Nika. He's got like the big
Yeah.
hammer."
Um. Yeah, it does seem like a lot of that fear and dramatized um interpretation of Loki. It comes from that younger generation
Which is
for sure, just
ironic
because
because
it's
they're,
been fed to them.
yeah, and it's ironic too because they're being kidnapped right now, right? And
Yeah.
the only person that seems like the person that's taken the most direct action of like knowing what they need to do is Loki. Because I don't know how you interpreted it, but when I saw Loki strike the tree with his hammer and shoot a lightning bolt, like, I think he hit the exact branch that he wanted to hit and dropped it exactly where he wanted to drop it, which was in the path of the kids leaving, which might not. Well, maybe he was like, that might stop the kids, but it also might be to cause a fire, or to be an arsonist. Is essentially what he's doing there. And it's kind of part of his whole trick, but ultimately it's what got the people in the village to be aware of what is happening at the school, because they're like, at first they're like, oh shit, there's like a fire, oh shit, there's all these monsters, oh, stuff's going on at the school and everybody's scrambling. So like, it's interesting that Loki basically just stood up and the first thing he does is try to, in my opinion, save Elbaf, save the kids.
Yeah, it did kind of spur them to action.
Yeah, and they.
And that's probably his whole deal. Like the
Hmm.
more and more we've been talking about that, that's got to be. It also he reminds me a lot of Kaido. Just
Mm,
going back to how he went out and did like was like rampaging. Because
mm,
Kaido, I think we all know is like a failed Joy Boy.
hmm.
I think if anything, he was also embodying this interpretation of Nika, this more bringer of war that he kind of has that reputation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Zanzi asks, how long was he out at sea? Well, Harold is murdered 14 years ago, and I think Shanks caught Loki 6 years ago, I believe. But anyways, it's the. I would say that he basically leaves Elbaf right after that whole um, death of Harold, and then is captured. Like, so that's how long he's out at sea. So I think it's somewhere around like 6 to 8 years. So kind of a while. And like, how is he even getting around is like a crazy part too that we don't really know about because it doesn't sound like he had like a big crew or anything. So, um, kind of opens up the possibility of whatever his devil fruit is. I guess, right? Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. How is he getting around? Interesting question.
I wonder if he has a ship. I think it would be cool to see because Oda does like to give, these hyper designed ships based on characters. It'd be cool to see his. I imagine it would be something similar to Aces, where it's kind of just like a one person ship.
It's that, or he just like rips off a big branch of the Atom Tree and just tosses into the ocean.
Yeah, you know what? That would honestly be more on brand,
Scoops
I
his
think.
uses his hammer and just whacks it against the water and just. I
Yeah, something crazy.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think he was out there for quite a while, and I mean, like whatever he was doing, it was enough that at least like how I see the timeline lining up, right? 14 years ago. So what? Luffy ate the devil fruit when he was 8, which is 11 years ago, right? Not about right.
Uh, I timelines are something I kind of have to constantly check, so
Yeah,
I'm not
I
entirely
think
sure.
he's 8. We'll just kind of lean into that for now. He might be like 7 or something, but it's pretty close to. And Luffy's 19 now, so that's like it. Kind of depends on. Uh, and we know Shanks got like a devil fruit from CP0, I think. Um, you know, relatively recently before they end up over in the East Blue. So it's kind of a weird timeline thing, but it kind of seems like, and we know Shanks was not an emperor when Luffy eats the devil fruit. So at that time, I think they revealed that his bounty though was like in the 2 billion range. So it seems like capturing Loki, he was basically granted the emperor title as kind of a result of that. Like that was his big push over where, I think that kind of goes along with all of the emperors where Blackbeard becomes an emperor from the Marineford stuff. Luffy becomes an emperor from everything that happens in Wano, and kind of Dressrosa. That's all part of the same saga. And Big Mom, I don't know. She's just like a legend for a long time. Old hag, and then Kaido, primarily for his reputation as a one-on-one fighter, and then also kind of like subjugating Wano, which was they already knew was a very powerful military force and had a poneglyph and all that kind of stuff. But it seems like capturing Loki was the thing that pushed Shanks into that kind of um, tier or caliber of pirate.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, and now we're getting into. I think we've is there anything that you wanted to talk about first? Because other than that, I think we can just start talking about maybe a little bit of predictions about Loki. But if you have anything
Okay.
before predictions, let it rip now.
Um, yeah, I wanted to bring it back to Usopp a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Um, so two characters, and I guess arcs, more so the characters than the arcs, but I think Ace and Marineford and Usopp and Syrup Village, maybe Enies Lobby. I think there's some connections there. Um, it could just be because Oda has certain patterns that he likes to go into, but for Usopp specifically, I think there's a lot of intentional parallels.
Hmm.
Obviously, they're both tricksters in a sense. They're both like not fully congruent with who they want to be, I think.
Hmm.
They both potentially are using facades to maybe hide some sort of like insecurity or pain or something deeper under the surface, for sure. Like, even though it's not as like obvious, I do think Loki's sort of persona that he's been showing is very similar to Sniper King, at least psychologically for him.
Mm.
Um, and then as far as Syrup Village, I think back to how like Usopp was like this scourge on his community. Like they hated him pretty much, but he was running around messing with them, and we learned that it's really because he kind of he's just having fun with them. He wants to sort of inspire them and keep things lively, I guess, in a sense. That's why he tells his stories to Kaya, and it's why he would lie to the villagers.
Hmm.
And I guess a similar sort of vibe with Loki's past of messing with the community of Elbaf. It's like a very sort of it's coming from the same place, I feel, of messing with it. Obviously going much more extreme with it, but um I do think he's doing it out of a place of purity, at least in his mind. Um as for Ace and Marineford, um both of them, it's a much more looser connection there, but both of them are falsely persecuted,
Yep.
and like both of them are made out to be these horrible figures that they're not, partially because of their bloodline, things that they don't really have any control over. Both of them are kind of like targeted, right from the moment of their birth. Both, personality wise, both of them are very hot headed and sort of rebellious, almost spiteful. Ace obviously mellows out over time, but he was at one point, I think, growing up very similar to Loki. Maybe before he met Whitebeard. Um, and then the other thing is like they're both going to be these crucial figures in starting these great wars. And Marineford was essentially pre-time skips version of whatever war is coming next.
Yep.
Um, and I do think Loki is going to play a very similar role there to Ace. Obviously, he's not going to be put up for execution or anything, but he is sort of in that same position of kind of. I mean, he wants to make that war happen, and I think he's going to, but just more so by the end of the arc, in line with Luffy and everyone and all the other allied.
Yeah, like Loki is very similar to Ace and probably Luffy in this regard as well, where the world in general, or like the people who like think they understand justice, are like this person doesn't even deserve to live, right? Like it would
Yeah,
they think it would be better if he was not born at all, which is
yeah, exactly.
super 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 dark, super dark, um, and shows kind of like the real kind of maybe like the thorns on the hearts of the people of Elbaf, right? Like I think all of us have been a little bit shocked by how different Elbaf was maybe from our expectations from Dory and Bragi, which, they kind of
Yeah,
missed all this stuff, right? Because they were on Little Garden. So they didn't, maybe they were kind of like a little bit um, spared of this kind of like nasty side of things. But then Dorian Broggy are also people that have actually spent time out in the world, seeing other places, meeting other people, and thus having a fuller perspective on the world and how things actually work. Whereas people who just lived on Elbaf, like I've been kind of hammering this whole time, their their limited perspective um, is really a source of a lot of kind of like the nastier elements of the culture of Elbaf. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, predictions. So
Hmm.
Loki, from everything that he's saying, um, he just kind of explicitly kind of wants to destroy the world. And if you're somebody from my channel, you probably already know my idea on this, and that I'm a big believer in Luffy being somebody that will destroy the world as well. Which I had a couple of funny comments on my video being like, "What? Luffy's not Eren Yeager, guys. Like, what are you talking about?" And I'm like, "No, he's not gonna genocide everybody. He's going to destroy, the world. He's gonna sink the world into the ocean or something." But also, from what we see in the Harley, there's this kind of implicit um, idea that there's destroying the world would let someone or a group of people meet something again finally. And my main idea of this is kind of ties back into Fishman Island, where um, Queen Otohime and that kind of like inherited dream is to finally live under what she says specifically is the true sun, right? And in the Harley, there's something referred to as the forbidden sun that gets completely enshrouded in darkness by this kind of world serpent type of thing in the first world. And so destroying the world could potentially, like, why somebody would want to destroy the world and not necessarily like kill everybody is because they want to kind of bring this thing that's been locked away back into the world because they believe that's going to have a massive change to the world. It's going to change everything, and we know that the world of One Piece it could use a changing. Like it's pretty fucked up. Do you have any
Have you
thoughts?
seen Film Red?
Yeah.
So in Film Red, Luffy says that him and Uta, their dream is to create a new Genesis. And obviously this is
Mm,
a movie,
yeah.
but I remember around the time it was coming out that Oda was saying that everything with Uta was canon. And there was something there's something in like the notes and sketch books that he released about it that implied that at least what Luffy was saying about the new Genesis is true, at least for One Piece.
Hmm.
Um, there are definitely other elements of Filmer that are canon, but I think that I mean that's essentially that may not be his true dream, but I think that is what he's going for. Like he does want to create a new Dawn as it's told in the real canon story, but he wants to create that Genesis. He wants to create that new beginning. Like so, in order to do that, he does have to sort of reset everything.
Hmm.
I think that where it gets twisted is with Loki, where he would probably be closer to something like Eren Yeager if left unchecked. I think maybe not on that scale, but he
Hmm.
would be a little bit more violent and destructive, which Luffy will obviously be as well. That's his whole thing.
Hmm.
But I think that by the end of Elbaf, they'll kind of be a little bit closer to being on the same page about. I don't know, because I'm still torn about whether or not this war is going to happen before they get to the One Piece. But I think that they will kind of be in the mindset of like, we have to sort of tear this all down, you know?
Hmm.
And Luffy will be crucial in sort of taming Loki, if you will, and making it a little bit more in line with something that's more acceptable, I think.
So all this kind of brings into mind one of the major differences between Luffy and Loki, because we're talking about how they both, to a degree, will or want to destroy the world and be kind of like part of that big change. Um, but like one of the big differences of Loki has some friends, but they're just like animals and stuff, right? They're in Shaggy. But Luffy is something like I think Loki is really trying to like do too much himself, right? Whereas Luffy,
Yeah.
as we've seen, especially in like Whole Cake, um, the post-war kind of like huge moment with Jinbei, um, the shit that happens in Water 7, Luffy knows that he can't do it all himself. And so that's
Yeah.
maybe like a really big weakness of Loki, is that Loki's trying to shoulder it all himself. It's kind of a lesson we learn with Vivi as well. Um, and that might be kind of why Loki is not that guy, really, because he doesn't yet understand how much he needs other people, how much he can't do on his own. And I think that's been made pretty damn clear by his current struggles. His gambles and his kind of like trickery and lies, they don't get it. They only go so far.
Yeah, I think he learned from a very young age that there wasn't really anyone on his side.
Yeah.
And so that's also where his persona comes from for sure.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of interesting too. Like we do know Loki went out into the world, right? Like that's just part of the lore at this point. And one of the lessons we learn about One Piece is like what Saul teaches Robin, like, hey, if you you keep living and you go out into the ocean, like you'll find friends, you'll find people um that you'll be important to them and all that kind of stuff, and they'll protect you. And then we also kind of have that conversation in Thriller Bark where Frankie meets Brooke, and he's like, how do you even like? You're a skeleton, dude. Like people are gonna see you and that they're gonna be terrified of you. And so you can imagine that regardless of what Loki was actually doing, like he wasn't accepted anywhere. Like obviously he's not accepted on Elbaf, but when he goes out in the world, I mean he's the size of oars and he's got like big ass horns and stuff and he's got bandages across his eyes. Like I mean, tough to find friends, right?
Yeah, for different reasons, he's emotionally just as vulnerable as Usopp was, I think. Of just like
Mm-hmm.
feeling that sort of not necessarily inferiority in Loki's case, but just doesn't really accept himself. I think he is like accepting of himself, but he feels a sort of conflict because of how much other people don't accept him. And it's just like very deeply ingrained within him.
Yeah, I think he probably desires it a lot, right? I think we kind of see that with
Yeah, yeah.
Shaggy. Um, it's very interesting. I guess I'm like, so as a result of everything that's going to happen, there's like three possibilities, right? Loki does something similar to what Luffy would do in a lot of situations, which is like Loki could die trying to save Elbaf. Like Luffy would be more than willing to do that for any of his friends, and while the people of Elbaf don't consider Loki a friend, like what Loki considers him to be might be a little bit more nuanced. So there's that possibility that could happen. And then the next possibilities are like Loki joining the Straw Hats as crew member or as just like kind of a grand fleet and be maybe part of maybe be his own thing. And then the last possibility I think is that whatever happens, Hajrudin could be um Hajrudin and Loki's relationship could be repaired by kind of like the revelations of what is actually going on, what actually happened in the past, and who they actually are, and how they actually feel about each other. And um, maybe Loki and Hajrudin could be uh, like co-captains or something similar to Dory and Bragi. You know what I mean? Um, that's also like a pretty that's probably what I would prefer out of anything. I would love to see them have like a true reconciliation, and um they both they're aren't they're the only family each of them has left, and having any family in this world of One Piece is very rare. Ooh, but I just got another nasty idea. Ooh, we're talking about Ace and Luffy and Loki and Hajrudin a lot here and stuff. Um, there's that kind of possibility that Luffy lost his brother, and so there's kind of that possibility that either Hajrudin or Loki lose their brother as well. But hopefully there can be like a change from everything that Luffy at least has learned, or maybe that they learn that they're able to actually save the other person. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be very satisfying to see them come together and save Elbaf together against this threat
Hmm.
by the end of the arc. And thematically, it would be very symbolic of eliminating that what's the word prejudice, the stigma around the different races, them sort of kind of coming together, uniting, symbolizing the uniting of all the giants. That would be very cool.
Yeah, I guess like you're saying, like if these two people who have like they kind of represent like the many different races of giants together, like they're kind of um mixed blood on both sides.
Yeah,
Like if they can come together, and if they can save Elbaf, and the people of the Elbaf kingdom, seeing them truly like putting their lives on the line for this kingdom that has treated them like absolute dog shit, then that's something that can actually kind of um, heal Elbaf a lot. Which that's like the most apparent thing that I've learned from Elbaf so far, is that this is like a kingdom that's ultimately in a lot of pain.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that's where I think that's going to be my official hopium is that they team up, and through their kind of like their their repaired relationship, or maybe like the first time their relationship is um more like akin to love, then that can give them the power and possibility and almost willpower, and like having somebody that can help them each can possibly save Elbaf and change it for good. And yeah, I think it's been really shocking how much Hajrudin is also kind of like a looked down on, right? That's like one of the most interesting parts. He's not that much less looked down on than Loki at the end of the day. And pretty much most of the reason he isn't looked down on as much is because they're like, well, at least he ain't Loki. Loki sucks more. So guess Hajrudin's all right.
yeah. I remember there were in the flashback with Big Mom. Um, you kind of got that sense of Hydrogen's inferiority too, but it was more so connected to his fighting capabilities. Like as a warrior,
Hmm.
he was like he really wanted to push himself, and it's similar to what we see in the flashback with Loki and him, where he was like he felt weak
Yeah.
because of his inability. He felt like he had something to prove. And I think there are some other layers to Hajrudin besides Loki and besides his blood.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see what Oda does with that in the flashback, which I
Oh,
do think the flashback is coming very soon.
oh
Like
yeah.
probably within
I
the
think
next
it's
couple of
coming.
chapters.
I think it's coming soon too.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what would kick it off exactly, because a lot of times, like with the Kuma flashback, like, and often with One Piece flashbacks, they come hardest at like this present moment of like really do or die moment, right? Because
right.
it's like implied that they're in a moment of great struggle and they're like really thinking back, like, like trauma just sometimes emerges so like in a way that's so out of their control that it's like if it's going to happen, it kind of depends, I guess, how much Loki and Hashiruden continue, how this conversation ends up going and stuff, right?
True.
Like I could see it kind of coming from that when we kind of cut back to it, and if they get into it and it kind of cuts back, that's one way. Or if they actually, the thing is, Loki's like so injured, he's so injured, uh, that I'm like, all right, is he gonna pull a Luffy and just eat some meat and be good? I mean, that'd be sick, but it definitely might not be like that. So I don't know. That's kind of like the big
Yeah,
kind of mix up in all this is like the current state and condition of Loki, where it looks like he's going to be okay at the moment, but he really was just at death's door. Like that attack he got hit with from Shamrock. Yeah, nasty shit. Hmm.
I think we'll have a better idea of where that whole plot is going after next chapter.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really get much of that last chapter, which I'm assuming because he wanted to set up everyone else where they're going, what they're doing, and then come back to Loki, which is obviously the main thing I think right now.
Oh yeah. I want to see Sommers get his ass whooped. That guy's a
Yeah,
nasty. He's a nasty dude.
yeah. He's Oda's like every arc he has a certain antagonist that's just like you just hate him, like no redeeming qualities, you know? And
Yeah.
it's like you love to hate him. So it'll be really great to see. I wonder who will actually fight him. What do you think like some of the matchups will be?
Hmm. It's so tough to say, as I think you would agree, because we don't know how much like Ragnarok is going to just like potentially erupt right now, which means like a lot of other big players would have to kind of come into the fold very soon. But hmm, Kieran Fruit guy, Killingham, he has a trident. Is that right? Mm.
Um, I don't remember.
There's just like so few people to even match up against too, which is tough. Uh,
Yeah,
man.
it's I don't know how this is gonna play out because I don't. I feel like if all of the Straw Hats were to go up against the Gods Knights, it wouldn't be that much of a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
they'd get mopped.
maybe that I'm underestimating them a little bit. I'm sure they've got some stuff up their sleeve, but it doesn't feel like where Wano, like you had these commanders where there needed to be these one-on-ones, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm almost like, are there even going to be any like major fights, or is it going to just revolve around like stopping these kids and kind of like enduring that pain? But if somebody
Yeah.
did fight, I feel like just the obvious one is that Zora would fight Sommers because of the sword user thing. It becomes kind of an interesting matchup. Killing
I would actually like to see Zoro fight Gunko.
because
I
she's a
I
woman too, or is there some other reason?
no, just because of her powers. I mean I
That's
don't
good.
really know
That's
where her
funny.
powers are gonna go.
Oh god, yeah, that would be good. She's like, "All right, you're going this direction," and then he gets lost and does something different
Yeah.
somehow. That'd be a
Or
good
like
gag.
they just don't work on him because of his ability just get lost. That'd be funny.
I
But
guess
it could
that
also be cool.
I guess for this first skirmish, I'm more interested in seeing some of the non uh monster trio fight. Like I don't really
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah.
care about seeing Zoro and Sanji, but I'd love to see Nami getting in the mix as like how they're like hurting the kids. Is like
Oh
she's
yeah,
obviously
I
pissed.
forgot about that.
I so want to see Usopp do something. So like let's get him in there. That'd be dope. Um,
Usopp versus Gunko could be cool too.
yes, and then maybe yeah, Usopp versus Gunko would be good.
I think Brook versus Killingham. I think they have similar goofy personalities.
Yeah, yeah, that guy is goofy. I'm so curious to see more of him too. Especially his devil fruit is like one of the most like
Oh yeah, so cool.
yeah, one of the cooler ones. Reminds me of like
Love
a
how we.
reminds me of like a later JoJo's stand ability where he's kind of already gone through all the obvious stuff and then he's like making just crazy shit and you're just like, "Oh, okay, there we go." Um
Oh, by the way, I've actually started watching JoJo's.
all right.
Based on your recommendation, it's absolutely insane.
Are you
I can't even imagine what I'm gonna see later.
where are you at?
I'm pretty early into part two.
Okay.
Just meeting the Pillar Man.
The pillar, they're iconic, man. They're those guys are like evil, goofy. I don't even. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
funny.
my
Part
friend was very excited to see me get there.
that's
Apparently,
funny.
that's like a big thing.
That's funny. Yeah, part two is. I feel like when I was watching part two, I'm like, what is even? I'm like trying to find like the balance in my head of like how serious it was and not serious. There's like there's some fights, especially near the later portion of part two, that I was like, damn, okay, this is like a cool fight and cool concept and um they kind of have all these like sometimes in JoJo's has some brutal deaths. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. And they also sometimes have like awesome like kind of monologues, I would say maybe, when somebody is like dying or something that I'm like it's like damn. He writes great death scenes and gets very creative in the fights and you're super early in the JoJo, so they're kind of like it's very Fist of the North Star inspired at that point too. JoJo's. I was actually thinking yesterday when I was talking to my wife. We watched JoJo's all the way through and are reading part 7. But I was like, man, I'm just looking forward to watching JoJo's again someday. It's a long watch. I'm like, I don't know when I'll watch it again, but it's something special.
Yeah, I'm just having a blast.
Yeah.
I can't believe I mean part one was a bit slow, but it just it just instantly clicked with me after a certain point. I think like around the time like Zeppeli was coming in.
So good.
I really liked Zeppeli
So
a
good.
lot.
So good. Yeah. Yeah, I can't say too much about Zeppelis, but yeah, it's a great character in JoJo's and stuff. I'm in part 1. I love Speedwagon. Goofy
Oh,
ass dude.
Speedwagon. Yeah.
The whole and Dio is iconic. Well,
I love the way that they talk too. Just like the dialogue is like something about it. It's just so it's like just a little bit overly dramatic, but in like the best way. It's like so entertaining. I love.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think too like yeah, JoJo's is just fun. I would say like that's like one of the things that I've always appreciated about getting into that. It's just such just a fun adventure to watch.
Yep.
It really embodies that. And part 2 is like so silly and stuff. And I love how Jonathan, he's like the good boy and stuff, and then you get Joseph and he's like
He's
almost the
so
opposite.
different too. Like that, I was not expecting that.
I just remember too when you meet Joseph, like the first thing he does is like beat the shit out of a cop, and I'm like, damn.
Yeah. And then that scene where he just pulls out a Tommy gun and then he has all those grenades and like I was watching a completely different show a couple episodes ago, you know?
Yeah, he's kind of like a. He's speaking of like this is all relevant, guys. This is relevant because Joseph Joestar, he's like a trickster. So you've met the Pillar
Nice
Man and
segue.
what was that?
I said it's a nice segue.
Yeah, it's a nice segue. One of my favorite early part two moments is when they meet the Pillarmen and they're just like insanely strong, obviously. And
Yeah.
Joseph is like pretending to be dead, I think. And he's like crawling away, and then they look at him, and then he's like playing dead again. And then they start talking to somebody else, and in the background you can see him crawling away again. And you're like, what a freaking goofball, man. Well, have fun with JoJo's. Glad to hear you're watching it and stuff. It's a nice ride. Yeah, we're on my wife and I channel and stuff. We're releasing we did some like without like referencing like the wiki and stuff too much. We tried to just like kind of casually explain each of the JoJo's parts, and that's just in preparation for our real life friends, so that they can kind of get a summary. They're not going to watch it. It's just a fact. They're not. They're watching Kitchen Nightmares and stuff like that. They're not going to be watching JoJo's. As much as I want it to happen, it's just not. And then we're doing like a 2-volume kind of discussion. Each 2 volumes of Steel Ball Run, which is part 7 of JoJo's, and going from there and just doing our own little podcast. It's a fun thing. It's like the One Piece stuff. It's not work to me or anything like that, but like it doesn't. I love JoJo's and I love a lot of other stuff as well, and it's kind of. I know you've released some videos on other like Mob Psycho and stuff, which I freaking love Mob Psycho so much.
Oh yeah, it's one of the best.
But like, maybe it'd be a little bit it'd be scarier to release a Mob Psycho video today algorithmically than just keep releasing the JoJo stuff. And releasing the One Piece stuff, sorry.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that though, because I do feel the urge to talk about other anime.
It's tough. Yeah, it's tough. And it's like you can like start a second channel, but then that's more time. Time is limited. Work. I think that we both should really try to make it a goal to cover other things on our. I mean, we both kind of are. You do more direct video essays, and I'm video essays / video essay adjacent. So like we can cover other topics and stuff. I think one thing I want to do too is incorporate like I'm sure you watch stuff oftentimes and are like you think about One Piece when you're watching something else, and that type of thing I'd love to kind of like incorporate other stuff that I love into videos by like kind of like especially when we're talking about like really interesting themes and ideas of One Piece, and then kind of like using other media or something that we love to kind of like expand those ideas a little bit. That's something I'm kind of going with, and I'm trying to do that a little bit with my current video where if I told you earlier how it's about it's like a little bit of a combination of the fan letter special and just like kind of what the Straw Hats in general mean to like the world of One Piece and to like the people of our real world, and then tying that all into the allegory of the cave, which is a very famous philosophical idea in a book by Plato, so I'm kind of incorporating other media, but it's just like 2,500 years old or something like that instead of more contemporary.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I think either my next video or the one after that, there's this fantasy series that I'm really into. It's a book series. It's called the Stormlight Archive.
Oh, I'm
well aware. I don't know if you know it.
I've read the first Mistborn book, and a
Okay,
couple
yeah,
and a novella from Brandon Sanderson. So I'm
yeah.
aware of things, but haven't read
So
Stormlight.
that series, and I don't know much about his other work, but at least the way he writes that series, there are a lot of similarities. Basically, a lot of the reasons why I really enjoy the Stormlight Archive are reasons I also enjoy One
Yeah.
Piece. There's so basically, I'm trying to do a video where I'm kind of like showing how they're similar and kind of being like, if you like One Piece, you'll probably like this. So yeah, I'm trying to do more stuff like that too, kind of like incorporating other media that reminds me of One Piece.
Yeah. It's funny. Zanzibar is like they need to get used to Japanese humor first, and that's true. It'd be
Oh
a
yeah,
shock to somebody's system to be like, "You've never seen an anime? Here's JoJo's." That'd be like,
that would probably turn them off from anime forever.
I'm like, what would? Yeah, there's a reason why there's like the beginner anime, um, classics, like a Death Note. I think is like one of the ones that a lot of people watch first. Full
Yeah,
Metal
Death Note,
Alchemist,
Attack on
even.
Titan,
Yeah,
Full Metal.
those are like the beginner ones, and then you get into the weirder stuff. I'm like Mob Psycho is like that as well. Like
Yeah.
that's a pretty hardcore one. If you've just never, you'd be like, what is even going on here? Anything that's like too about like a school, like surrounding like a school, because they're just so different than like schools in like the Western world that like any people are just confused by that in general. I tried showing a friend um Vinland Saga. This is how normal he was about it. Like we I showed he was like, okay, I'll watch it, and so he sat down on my couch and we're watching it, and we played the first episode. He's like, that was great. Let's keep watching more. We watched the first 4 episodes all in a row, and we are both fathers with kids and stuff. And he said, never watched it again on his own. And but his reasoning is because ultimately he's kind of weirded out that they're Vikings speaking Japanese. I'm like, what kind of dumbass logic is that, brother? Like, I can't even wrap my head around whatever that is as a criticism. But
Yeah, it's funny because they actually do, as especially in the prologue, which is season one, they
mhm,
go more into they talk. They're all talking the same language, from a show standpoint the whole time.
mhm.
They mention how certain people are in world actually speaking like Danish or these other languages. So it does comment on that. It comments that like in real life, it's like in fantasy, they have like these common languages usually, but everything's in English. It's just sort of like that. They
Yeah.
they do comment on it.
Well, yeah, since you're watching JoJo's, I'll have to like commit to. Well, I've already committed my head, but you watching JoJo's will hopefully push me to get into Vinland Saga deeper than I currently am, which is only I don't. How many books are there? The big volumes. There's probably
Um,
15 or
I
so.
think it's like yeah, I'm not too sure because I've never read the physical
Hmm.
versions, but I think it's upwards of 15 to 20.
Okay.
Could be more. I don't know how much they've printed since the newer arc started,
Mm,
but it's
yeah,
getting close to ending at least.
I have 13 or 14 of them or something already, so I'm set.
That's that's at least a good portion into season two. Maybe like the beginning, but I think like chapter 50, 60 is when season one ends, and then season two encompasses up to like chapter 103 or something like
Yeah,
that.
that anime seems like it goes pretty fast. Well
Yeah,
paced. I'm
honestly, the
jealous.
anime the anime is really good. If I would recommend watching it like alongside it if you read it, or at least watching like key moments. They did a really really beautiful job.
Yeah, I'm what I'm assuming will happen is I usually read a lot more as the weather gets nicer because I can sit outside and kind of read while my kids play and stuff. Probably start reading Vinland Saga a lot more in the summer, and then as I've already what I have seen, I'm like it's awesome. Like I already the 2 or 3 books that I've read, fantastic, and I know it only gets better. So what I'm assuming is going to happen is I'm going to be like, all right, I'm now gonna, and I've already talked to this about my wife because we almost always watch an anime. Oh my, I got another good one to share. But I'll probably be like, all right, we're watching the anime now because selling her to like start a whole new manga it's she's already like she's already read so many mangas on my recommendation, including One Piece. So like, you know, she already reads a lot on her own manga and otherwise. So I'll probably just be like, let's watch the anime. And yeah, she's really big into Apothecary Diaries, the anime and the light
I've
novels.
heard about that.
Yeah, if Apothecary Diaries, legitimately great anime. Definitely recommend it. The so the so the ultimate Zanzi. If you're still here, I want you to hear this too because I just thought of. We always joke about this anime as being the ultimate like shocking anime to show somebody that is not deep enough into anime yet, which is it comes out on Sundays. It's called My One or the 100 Girlfriends Who Really, 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 Really Love You or whatever. Like, and it's about a guy who has 100 girlfriends. So it's like this really silly harem anime, but he literally like fully loves them and cares about them and treats them all like equally and compassionately. And the person that whoever writes this loves One Piece. There's quite a few. The whole reason I even gave it a shot in the first place is because I was just like I saw like somebody post like that this anime had like a bunch of One Piece references and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And then I like kind of looked into it. I'm like, "The shit's like considered good." And so we watched it just as like a funny show, but it is so Have you ever seen Food Wars?
A little bit.
Okay, it's very similar to Food Wars where it's insanely hypersexual, so like insane. I mean, it's extremely over the top. So we always joke like, what if we just showed our parents just one this last episode? Like it would just I don't know if they could like recover from the absurdity of and the depravity of this.
Yeah,
But
too deep down the iceberg.
yeah, but if you've never watched Trashy Harem, like this is like a legitimately just good one. Like we watch a lot of anime, and uh, what's one that we watch? Like like we like unironically are like this is better than most of the stuff that we watch. So it's kind of a if you want to test how comfortable you are with really over the top anime Japanese humor, then that's a good one. Um, but yeah, Mob Psycho is one of my absolute favorites. Um, yeah, have you ever seen Clanad or something? Clanad is crazy good.
I've heard it's really good.
Hard to
I
find.
haven't. Yeah, I haven't seen it on like. I don't think it's on Crunchyroll or anything like that.
Clanad
I need to
is
get deeper into like slice of life stuff.
yeah. If you have Netflix, there's a slice of life called Kataro Lives Alone. Super fucking good. So short. It's like 8 episodes. Amazing. Very, very. It's tragic though because this is like about a little 4-year-old boy who lives alone, and so there's a very kind of dark uh, perception there. Okay, one second. But Clanad is one of my favorite animes of all time. I actually have like a whole script written for it, but I was too shitty at video editing when I wrote it, and so when I started putting it together, I was like, I'm gonna let this one sit for a while. But it is probably the most like. There's never been an anime that's made me cry as much as Clanad, for sure, and so painfully. And I watched that when I was. I don't know how old you are exactly, but probably around your age. I was in college, and I watched Clanad, and it was like one of the most devastating stories I've ever read. Which it doesn't really look like that at first, but it is like a slice of life kind of shojo, but it also has this like fantasy elements in it that kind of uh, what do I say? Kind of like tie together, kind of like the different things that happen across time in this story. But super duper recommend Clanad to anybody who hasn't seen it and is listening to this. Like, I think it's such a beautiful story. It's inspired greatly from Murakami's Hard Boiled Wonderland novel, which is pretty old but very good. And then yeah, Fruits Basket is also very good. These are ones
Yeah, I
that
was just thinking about Fruits Basket.
I know
It's
a lot
another
of
one's kind of like fantasy.
yeah, I know a lot of shonen fans don't like fully engage with like the things that are like shojo or shojo adjacent, but I mean, these things are like if you like One Piece flashbacks at all, like these are, these are things that I find very similar and like them for similar reasons. They kind of hit you in that kind of like they hit your heart in that same way as a good juicy One Piece flashback or juicy One Piece kind of like moment of kind of like affirming what it means to live. Like all these hit that very well. And then the last one I would recommend that I love, if you haven't seen it, is Made in Abyss. Made in Abyss is fucking crazy.
Oh, I have heard about that. I actually heard about that from the actress who plays the live action Nami was saying that was like her favorite anime. It got me pretty interested in it, the way she was
So
describing
good.
it.
So good. Also, one of the most painful. Like, I'm like, what do I do to myself? I know Vinland Saga is very painful too, and at a lot of
Vinland
times.
Saga is painful, but it's like it's very optimistic. It's very like a hopeful. Like it
Yes,
takes you down to those depths just so it can pull you out of it in very meaningful
yes.
ways, similar to One Piece. So
That's
it's not
why
like brutal.
that's all these things that I'm recommending. By the way, like
Oh, okay.
because
Okay.
I've learned enough about myself that I don't really like things as much that just are the fucked up things, even if they are like
Yeah.
well written. Like I think they're good or whatever, but it just doesn't like mean as much to me. It's if you like a show like Severance we finished recently. A lot of people are like Severance is so fucking good, and I'm like, I finished Severance season 2, and I was like, I kind of I mean, I thought it was good and great and stuff, but like in terms of like themes and tone and messaging, like it does
It doesn't resonate.
it doesn't have that kind of like optimism that I really really
Yeah.
really love. And to be if it's gonna have that, it's like if it's gonna have the pain, um I want that kind of like feel good part to come back at least equally. And something even
Yeah.
like Berserk has that. Like Berserk is known as probably largely the darkest manga out there, and it, in my opinion, is probably pound for pound the best written and best art and best paneled manga out there, even surpassing One Piece. And Berserk even hits like the part of Berserk the two parts of Berserk that made me cry the most was like a moment when Guts like hits like a moment that's not pain, and it was just like one of the most like it wasn't even about the pain in like that moment. Like I just like found myself just crying uncontrollably. It was a very weird experience. And then somebody like later in the story healing from an immense amount of pain, like very directly healing, like that also was like, and the way it's written is just unbelievably well done. Like the reason that people don't read Berserk for like the sexual violence and stuff, that's completely justified in stuff. But I'm like, if somebody is listening to this and if you can stomach that part of it, um, Berserk is a beautiful story. I think very much in line with the Vinland Saga and One Piece and stuff. Made in Abyss is a little bit less on the optimistic side, is my main criticism of it, but it is very, very beautiful still. All right, do you got any last minute anime recommendations, Buggy?
Um, I would just also recommend a lot of stuff you did, like Fruits Basket.
Oh, you've
As
seen
long
it?
as we're on the topic of slice of life, yeah, it's probably my favorite slice of life.
So good.
Next to like Horimiya. I like Horimiya because it's just very
Hmm.
very grounded. Just feels like natural relationships in that show. But yeah, for slice of life, those are my two picks.
Yeah,
And
so
then yeah, definitely Vinland Saga since we're on the topic.
so excited.
Just because it's Vinland Saga is almost done. And it's one of the best in my opinion. It's in many ways I like it a little bit more than One Piece, but yeah.
Yeah, Vinland Saga, I'm so excited for it. I scooped it up on like a Humble Bundle. That's how I got all the volumes. Because I
Oh,
mean, it's
nice.
expensive to
Yeah,
buy.
I want to, but I just haven't gotten to a point where I can justify it yet.
Yeah, I think the Humble Bundle. I got like a whole bunch of other manga, and Vinland Saga was one of them. I spent maybe like $20 on it. Azumanga Daioh is fantastic. Um, I have a couple volumes of it. It's slice of life. It's yeah, it's hard to like really know how to sell it, but it's a very casual read and very good. I would say that since you've watched Fruits Basket, Clanad is um very similar tone stuff to
Yeah,
Fruits
and
Basket.
when you were describing Clan, I was just thinking of Fruits Basket. I was like, maybe I could get into this.
And that's how Clanad that's and I personally like Clanad a little bit more, which is crazy.
Okay.
But in Fruits Basket, I think Fruits Basket is a straight up masterpiece. You probably can't see it on my bookshelf there too, but I have like a volume up there somewhere. I think it's actually blocked by your picture right now. Fine, but yeah, we got a few volumes of the manga as well, which it's kind of crazy how it looks compared to the anime. That recent anime adaptation is so well done and stuff.
Yeah.
I do want to make a video on Fruits Basket as well. Like I have a script somewhere in my notes, specifically about it because that's how good I thought it was. I was just like, I think if I made a video on other series that I've watched at the moment, my main ones are Clanad, Fruits Basket, and Mob Psycho. But I'd also want to like Mob Psycho is one that I'd specifically want to rewatch for because I've rewatched the other ones more recently. But Mob Psycho I've only seen once all the way through.
Yeah, I recently did that too with Mob Psycho. I went back and rewatched it because I had only seen season 3 as it was coming out, so I wanted to kind of watch it all together.
Season 3 is so
But
freaking good. Oh
it's perfect. It's like to me, I don't think there's really anything I would change about it. I think it's just exactly what it needs to be.
yeah, that is. Oh, this is another banger. This is the last one, and the part I love about this particular anime, um, is how short it is. You know, like a nice short masterpiece is really nice. Ping Pong, the animation. People are
I've heard
finally
so much
started.
about that.
People are finally started to talk about it, but I watched it not long after it came out, and before any of my One Piece stuff, before being a dad and stuff, I was like a high level athlete, so that might be something that colored it a lot for me. But it's such like a beautiful story, and the One Piece connection to this is that um, Oda, in his art books, the color walks, he does interviews for people. Like he's interviewing other creative people, and one of the people he interviews is Matsumoto, who is more known currently for his Kaiju #8 manga and the anime adaptation.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty popular among the shonen boys. uh, and but way before he did Kaiju #8, he did Ping Pong the manga, and it's a seinen manga, and it just has this very like really high contrast art style where there's not like a lot of like normal shading. It's just all black or all white, and it's very kind of like this loose flowing line work and stuff. And then the anime adapts it just so faithfully and stuff, and the music just bangs and just has such a beautiful story in there. It's such a fast watch. The first time I watched it all in just one go, just bam, 12 episodes or 11 episodes or whatever it was. That's like,
Wait, so that guy is the same guy who's doing Kaiju #8?
yep,
Wow, I never knew that.
yep, yeah.
That's really cool.
He has crazy. variety. But when that interview with Oda, Oda's like, he tells Matsumoto to his face, he's like, how the fuck did you make ping pong? Like, he's telling him, he's like, this is a masterpiece. Like, how did you do it? Like, what was your mind? And Matsumoto's just like, I don't know, I just like did it. And they're
Yeah,
like, all right, I guess that's the type of guy that he is. He just kind of does things. That guy has like, he has manga about cats walking around the Louvre, the museum in France. Like, he has manga about like kind of like a, what's that story with all the kids that are like on the island by themselves?
oh,
Lord of
Lord of the
Flies. Yeah,
Flies.
he's kind of like a Lord of Flies type of manga as well. He's just got crazy variety. And then Kaiju Number 8 is like, I don't. Have you ever read or watched Kaiju?
Yeah, I've been following it pretty closely with the manga. I've only been reading the volume. I enjoy it.
Are you caught up?
It's kind of just, I'm not caught up because
Okay.
I'm reading the volumes as they're coming out.
Okay.
Um, I'm caught up to the anime, which I really liked.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like it's typical shonen stuff, but I feel like it has enough in there just to make it a little bit more, refreshing. I like the
Yeah.
whole focus on kaiju, and I like that the main character's like 30 years old. It's a fun dynamic you don't really see.
Yeah. Yeah. Kaiju Number 8. Like I started reading the manga fairly early into it, and I remember reading the first like 60 or 70 chapters very fast because I thought it was just very good. And there was a little bit of a lull
Yeah.
in there, and I probably also got distracted by One Piece at that point. I think I read Kaiju before One Piece, and then yeah, but yeah, it's pretty dang good. It's definitely very solid, I would say, at the minimum. If you like any of that
Mm.
type of stuff, it's got good action, it's got good monsters, it's got good story, just good. Definitely a big fan of that. Yeah, I'm caught up though. Like it's ending soon too, so it's yeah, I'm curious how it ends. It's definitely good. Lots of mystery in it too. Love some good mystery.
Yeah, I love when there's like mysterious elements to the plot.
You know what
I
sucked
love
me
that
in
sort of thing.
recently is Sakamoto Days.
Yeah, I need to check out the anime.
Yeah, a lot of people I saw online were criticizing the anime, and I found the anime perfectly fine. It's a thing too. I don't know if you're like a Chainsaw Man person, but Chainsaw Man kind of was overhyped as an anime, but primarily just for the first season, right? Because they're covering like season one of something like this is only covering the first like 40-ish chapters. And then for a lot of series that make it a long time, the first 40 chapters, it's just pretty much all set up, So for Sakamoto Days, for instance, you just like the gas starts, kind of shortly after.
Mm.
So that's the only thing I would say like about Sakamoto. For instance, like once I actually didn't read the first like what the anime covered. I watched the anime. It ended, and I was like, I'm gonna check out the manga because it was pretty good, and we're kind of going somewhere interesting. And I got pretty much sucked right in. Like came in at like chapter 40 something, and then I think I'm on chapter like 100 something at the like low 100s at this point. So that's a good indication of how much it's sucked me in. And Chainsaw Man is insane, but the true like beauty of Chainsaw Man doesn't really fully kick in until what will be probably season 2 or something. Or I don't know really what their plans are for Chainsaw Man, but yeah, Chainsaw Man Part 1 is amazing as well. Lots of good stuff out there, man. These people are. I think I told you about Orb last time a little bit, and the guy who
Yeah.
made Orb, he's currently 29, and Orb has been done for like in the manga for like 3 years. And then he was already writing it for like 5 years before it ended. So I'm like, this dude was like, what, 20, 21, writing like such like a beautifully well written, well researched. I'm like, it just makes me feel kind of bad about myself. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, some of these people, they're just like geniuses or something. Like,
I
I
think they
think,
just the culture in Japan around manga is like you get kind of commit everything to it, right?
yeah,
Like a lot of them just like it's all say that it's like all they've been doing. It's like high school.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. The amount of commitment they have to this stuff is insane, insane. And yeah, Oda is very much, one of those people. I don't know the Vinland Saga author. What's his name?
um, I think. Wow, I can't remember. I normally would know it off the top of my head. Not sure. I think it's Yukimura.
He seems to have more
Um,
of a relatively more normal human release schedule.
yes,
This
he's been doing it for 20 years, something like that.
Yeah,
But he does monthly releases, and occasionally he'll just take a month off, so we might not get a chapter for like 2, 3 months at
yeah,
certain times. But the chapters are pretty long, um, and even though the story's taken longer, you can definitely tell it's like that's just like a much more realistic way to just do something creative. Um,
yes, yeah, yeah. He definitely. That's kind of like one of the few vibes I've had from him, and like because I've seen a little bit of his interviews and stuff before, and I was like, this guy seems like he knows himself enough that he keeps a good balance to not like burn himself out, destroy himself, because everybody knows about Kentaro Miura with Berserk, and that you feel it too when you read Berserk. You're like, you can tell like how much time and commitment you can like kind of. There's like there's some interesting characters in that portion of Berserk when he's just grinding like a lunatic. That's about kind of the grind of being an artist. That's very profound and stuff, but like you can tell like how much creating it was really kind of affecting him. And Berserk takes starting around like the 2010 era, like 2010ish. He finally like um and it's actually right at that moment that I was telling you about, that kind of like positive moment for Guts. I think part of it, what destroyed me, was like also having the context of what Kentaro Miura was going through at the same time, and kind of him also kind of having a positive change in his life. And um, that's when Berserk starts taking like having a chapter come out like every 3 or 4 months instead of monthly, with this like insanely detailed art and stuff. Yeah, and it seems like Oda has a much better release schedule now too. With he takes he like right now we're kind of fortunate where we're getting 3 chapters in a row oftentimes and then a break. But for a long time he was just like like I don't even. I would assume that Oda probably has like times when he had like 30, 40 chapters just consecutive, bam, back in the day. And
yeah, I remember hearing people say that there was a long stretch where there were no break weeks at all.
yeah, and um, the author of JoJo's, he was the same way for a long time. I mean, um, JoJo's was weekly shonen through part 6, which is that's like the equivalent of like Dressrosa ish type of like progression of the storyline. And then when he gets to part 7, he jumps over to Seinen and does monthly. And I'm like, good for you, man. That's got to be such a nice change. Because yeah, that weekly grind sounds psychotic, to be quite frank. I mean,
Yeah,
could you imagine putting that into your videos? I mean, you'd have some banging videos, but you'd probably
I
burn
mean,
out unbelievably hard.
oh yeah, I mean, I've had periods where I was doing videos like a video a week, and like it's possible, but you have to literally dedicate like almost every waking moment, and you get the video out right before your like due date or whatever, and
Yeah,
then you immediately get on the next one. So it's like it's realistic, but it's completely unhealthy and just
yeah,
a recipe for disaster. I mean, obviously they're they have like editors and stuff, and like they're making lots of money, so it's a little bit easier when that's coming in. But
Hmm.
um, it's just a completely different lifestyle.
Oh yeah, for guys like me and you who are doing the writing, the editing, the recording, the thumbnail, the
Yeah,
communication with the community, like it's really have like you got limitations. You can't do it.
yeah,
You can't do it all and have a Grand Line review release schedule.
yeah,
And I'm sure he seems like a very busy dude as well. I think he does 3 videos a week or something completely insane. But
yeah,
he's definitely got editors. He's got artists and
yeah. He's got a
stuff.
whole team.
It's somebody like me and you. A week is a stretch, right? I think when you were doing a week too, you were like, well, a lot of your videos I think were like a little bit under 8 minutes, even, right?
Yeah,
And
I was only able to realistically do that when I
yeah,
was like, okay, I'm gonna set a limit at making these shorter. You know,
yeah,
I couldn't imagine doing anything past like 12 minutes weekly.
yeah. And you're a student and stuff still. You're a young guy. You got to have the balance as well. And I
Yeah,
got kids, so and married. We find that balance in our lives and make it work. And I wish I started when I was in school. I wanted to, but there's that combination of not knowing how, and then you know, it's hard to try something like that. And as anybody that's made a YouTube video knows, pretty much get no views for a while, and so you're basically just practicing by yourself, and that's just the
hmm
reality. And you kind of just got to embrace that grind.
yep. Can't get good at something until you've been bad at it for a while.
Yeah, sometimes people like in my Discord or something, or somebody will like DM me and be like, "Hey, like your videos. Like, I really want to make a video, but I like have it." And I'm like, you kind of just gotta, if you really want to do it, you just gotta do it. Because
And
if you're scared of failing, like probably the realisticness is you are going to quote unquote fail at first. And but that's the part of getting better at pretty much anything. I've been practicing drawing for a year and a half now, and I suck ass. But if I go back and look at my older, I mean, it's the light and day. And I had no
yeah,
talent at drawing at all. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough how much I did not have talent out at it. So, and like I'm just like, now that I'm used to kind of the growing pains of YouTube, I feel like I can push through those kind of growing pains easier, as you know
yeah. I
talent.
mean, that's kind of what One Piece is
Yeah.
all about in a sense. I mean, at least Luffy's character. That's kind of what my last video about Luffy is kind of tapping into. It's like just kind of with a lot of things in real life, you just kind of gotta do it,
Yep.
and over time you will get better. And that's kind of how Luffy's character is written within the story.
Yep.
That's like his whole
Exactly.
vibe.
Exactly. All right,
Um.
PK. Oh, go ahead if you want to say something. We're gonna wrap it up here in a second, Lou.
Okay. Yeah. No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, it's time for me to go wrangle my kids. I hear them going. We're my 3-year-old and I were and my wife were watching the anime. We're on Drum Island so far. It's adorable
Oh,
too because
nice.
now for a long time we would just put it on for dinner and we're like One Piece is the dinner show,
hmm
like around dinner time. And now it's like watch the one episode. And he's like, put on another, Dad. I want to watch another episode. And I'm like, damn straight
That's
you
gonna be
do.
great.
I love you,
He's
son.
gonna look back on that fondly.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited for like when he actually starts, understanding what's going on. Because
hmm
most of what he gets now, he's like walking around and gum pistoling his teachers and stuff like that. Yeah, we're watching English. My son can't read.
Oh
He's not
yeah,
a
of
3-year-old
course.
prodigy, Zanzibar. That'd be sick though if he could. He thinks he can read. He picks up those books and he's like, "I'm reading this, Daddy." I'm like, "That's upside down. buddy, but that's okay. But yeah, PK, thank you for being here and stuff. It was a lot of fun, and thank you for anybody who has been in the chat, popping in and out, and anybody who watches the VOD. You guys are all appreciated. PK has a new video on his channel and stuff, so go check him out. His name should be blue in the title, so you can just click on it. And he's got some other interesting stuff on his channel, and I think you got 2 weeks until you got another release, but nice.
Yep.
And then I
Should
got
be streaming this week.
Yeah, oh yeah,
for,
streaming
video.
the next weekend. Or are you streaming during the week, you think?
Probably during the weekend.
Cool. And yeah, I got a cool video coming out soon. I'm excited to have it done. And you know how it is when you're working on a video, you're like, I just want this to be done so I can do something else. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Kind of at the boring part where you're kind of putting, I don't know how you order it, but all my audio and stuff is all structured and cut up. And I just need to put the stuff on top of it for the most part.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to be done. But I'm excited. I'm going to show it to PK Buggy, and he can tell me how good or bad it is and go from there. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. All right.